Welcome to Occult Mysticism, where hidden wisdom comes alive. Today we embark on a profound journey into Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, a cornerstone of esoteric philosophy and Masonic teachings. Explore the symbolic depths, moral insights, and cosmic harmony unveiled through its degrees. Join us as we unravel this timeless tapestry and step into the light of ancient mysteries. In the grand tapestry of esoteric literature, Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry stands as a monumental work, a veritable lodestar for those who would delve into the philosophical and moral underpinnings of the Masonic order. This tome, intended not for the casual glance of the uninitiated world, but for the earnest study of the brethren, unfolds a profound system of instruction, veiled in allegories and illuminated by symbols. It is, as Pike himself states in his preface, a compendium drawn equally from his own extensive thought and the wisdom of countless ancient philosophers and eloquent thinkers, presenting lectures of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite for profound contemplation. It is a journey not merely through Masonic degrees, but through the intellectual and spiritual history of humankind, seeking to impart not just knowledge, but wisdom and manhood. The very essence of Masonic teaching, as articulated in this work, lies in its symbolic method. Unlike conventional instruction that relies on explicit dogma, Masonry, a successor to the ancient mysteries, utilizes symbols as the opening of a problem, requiring research, and constituting philosophy, the arch expounder. This approach invites the initiate to personal discovery, urging him to study, interpret, and develop these symbols for himself rather than passively receiving dictates. Pike, ever the scholar, acknowledges that though Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, it is so only in this qualified sense that it presents but an imperfect image of their brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur. Yet, within these ruins, a profound system of morality and dogma awaits, promising to elevate the individual and, by extension, society itself. This extensive summary endeavors to navigate the labyrinthine depths of Pike's work, illuminating the path he lays out for the Masonic aspirant across its many degrees. Part 1. The Lodge of Perfection, Foundations of Morality and Society. The initial degrees of the Scottish Rite, collectively known as the Lodge of Perfection, lay the foundational stones of Masonic philosophy, initiating the candidate into the very essence of moral and societal order. Pike meticulously dissects each symbol, revealing layers of meaning far beyond their superficial interpretations. Apprentice first degree, force, rule, and the genesis of order. The journey commences with the entered apprentice, confronted by seemingly simple working tools, the 12-inch rule and the common gavel. Pike immediately elevates these implements into profound symbols. Force, he posits, whether that of gunpowder or the raw might of humanity, is unregulated or ill-regulated, not only wasted in the void, but, striking in the dark, recoils and bruises itself. It is destruction and ruin, a blind Polyphemus. The gavel, representing this raw, untamed force, must be regulated by intellect, symbolized by the rule. Intellect, like the compass needle to a ship, guides the immense power of the people towards progress, truth, and love. Only when directed by a brain and a law can deeds of daring produce lasting results and sublime conquests. The rough ashlar, a stone as taken from the quarry in its rude and natural state, is not merely a craftsman's block but a metaphor for the unorganized people as a mass. Conversely, the perfect ashlar, or cubical stone, represents the ideal state, symmetrical, efficient, its powers properly distributed and duly adjusted in equilibrium. The three visible faces of the cubical stone symbolize the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches of government, while its three invisible faces embody liberty, equality, and fraternity, the very threefold soul of the state. This interplay of force and regulation, chaos and order, is a recurring theme, echoing throughout Pike's discourse. Prayer, though Masonry does not usurp religion, is deemed an essential part of our ceremonies. It is the soul's aspiration toward the absolute and infinite intelligence. Pike refutes the shallow scoff that prayer is absurd because it cannot change divine plans, arguing instead that our free agency and our will are forces. Prayer is a force. He suggests its efficacy lies within the divine law, just as faith and love have their effects. The lodge itself is a temple, a microcosm of the universe, replete with symbolism. It's supported by three great columns: wisdom, force or strength, and beauty, represented by the Master, Senior Warden, and Junior Warden, signifies that nothing can endure without them. This triad, however, carries other and profounder meanings, hinting at the equilibrium of God's infinite wisdom and infinite force, leading to perfect harmony. The two columns at the lodge entrance, Jachin and Boaz, draw from the Temple of Solomon. Pike moves beyond the conventional Rite interpretation, he shall establish, and in it is strength, suggesting a deeper Kabbalistic meaning tied to active and vivifying energy and force, Jachin and stability, permanence, in the passive sense, Boaz. The lodge's unlimited dimensions, covered by the canopy of heaven, and the allegorical ladder seen by Jacob, typically interpreted as faith, hope, and charity, are expanded by Pike to reflect ancient mysteries. He connects the ladder to the 7 planetary spheres through which the human soul ascends and descends, emphasizing that the addition of the 3 principal rounds to the symbolism is wholly modern and incongruous. The great lights of Masonry, the Holy Bible, square, and compasses are presented with a nuanced understanding. The Bible's presence depends on the candidate's religion, stressing that the obligation is taken on the sacred book or books of his religion. The square, suited for plane surfaces, symbolizes earthly and bodily concerns, while the compasses, describing circles, relate to the heavens and the soul. Yet, even in this distinction, Pike notes that the divine ever mingles with the human, with the earthly, the spiritual intermixes. Nations too have souls, and woe to that people which, seeking the material only, forgets that it has a soul. The 3 lesser or sublime lights, sun, moon, and master of the lodge, are reinterpreted. The sun is the life-giving and generative power of the deity, and the moon, the passive capacity of nature to produce. The master, embodying the master of light and life, dispenses light to the brethren. The ornaments, mosaic pavement, indented tessel, and blazing star are stripped of their superficial Rite explanations. The black and white pavement, Pike asserts, symbolizes the good and evil principles of the Egyptian and Persian creed, the eternal conflict between light and shadow, freedom and despotism. The blazing star, far from merely guiding the Magi, originally represented Sirius, Anubis, and Horus, ultimately evolving into a symbol of liberty and freedom, embodying the creative energy of the deity, manifested as light. The 6 jewels, square, level, plumb, movable, rough ashlar, perfect ashlar, tracing board, immovable, are imbued with broader significance, extending beyond individual moral conduct to the collective nature of the state and human progress. The point within a circle, bordered by 2 parallel lines rather than representing saints, John, is traced to Kabbalistic symbolism, representing God in the center of the universe, or Yod, the creative energy, irradiating space, with the parallel lines hinting at the justice and mercy of God in equilibrium. Finally, the degree concludes with Masonry's Decalogue, emphasizing adoration of God through virtue, the pleasure of doing good, the immortality of the soul, ceaseless war against vice, honoring parents and the aged, cherishing family, loyalty to friends and country, avoiding insincere friendships and excess, mastering passions, listening more than speaking, forgetting injuries, and seeking virtue and justice. The overarching command, however, is, "A new commandment give I unto you, that ye love one another." The initiate is apprenticed to the task of elevating society morally and intellectually, a continuous struggle toward the light, advocating for truth against tyranny even when facing discouragement. Fellowcraft, Tuchen degree, the pursuit of knowledge and freedom advancing to the Fellowcraft degree, the focus shifts to the pursuit of knowledge and its profound connection to human liberty. Pike emphasizes that, anciently, religion and philosophy were inseparable, and knowledge was conveyed through symbols, and the priests invented or perpetuated a display of rites and exhibitions, which were not only more attractive to the eye than words, but often more suggestive and more pregnant with meaning to the mind. Masonry, as a successor of the mysteries, continues this tradition, its ceremonies serving as the opening of a problem, requiring research, and constituting philosophy, the arch-expounder. Pike clarifies that Masonry, while identical with the ancient mysteries, is so in a modified sense, presenting only an imperfect image of their brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur. Crucially, he states that while Christianity taught fraternity, it repudiated that of political equality, emphasizing obedience to authority. Masonry, however, was the first apostle of equality, adding it to liberty and fraternity, thereby claiming a threefold heritage. This arose from the distinctly seen truth that man is supreme over institutions and not they over him. This truth, once revealed, imposed new duties. Man owed it to himself and his country to seek freedom, making tyranny and usurpation the enemies of the human race. The adoption of stone masonry's working tools for symbolic use further illustrates this evolving understanding. Masonry, he asserts, aided in bringing about the French Revolution, supporting movements that championed the people's right to choose their rulers. This truth, Pike declares, had the omnipotence of God on its side, recognizing that to advance truth is to enhance the spiritual glory of the race. The ultimate gift Masonry bestows is manhood, encompassing science and philosophy, which are not opposed to religion but rather intellectual guides to religious sentiment and the reading of God's first scriptures on the earth and heavens. Knowledge in itself is insufficient. Wisdom is power, and her prime minister is justice, which is the perfected law of truth. The aim of education is to make one wise, for liberty is a curse to the ignorant and brutal. Political science, therefore, seeks to secure freedom of thought, conscience, speech, and action, ensuring impartial justice and accountability of public officers. Pike vividly recounts historical atrocities under despotism to underscore the necessity of Masonry's political mission to prevent future tyrannies and uphold freedom. The fellowcraft is guided by reason, love, and faith. Reason alone is insufficient, particularly when dealing with the infinite, where we must revere and believe. Faith, Pike insists, is a necessity to man, governing our daily lives far more than knowledge. However, such faith must not be absurd or contradict reason, experience, or science, nor degrade the deity. Love, or loving kindness, must accompany reason to prevent fanaticism and persecution. Genius, combined with force and wisdom, is depicted as the true ruler, capable of unveiling mysteries and building civilizations. The mallet and chisel symbolize the development of the energies and intellect of the individual and the people. Cultivating intellect is essential for securing wise rulers in a free country. Pike laments that power is often held by the small and the base, and that constitutions and laws, without genius and intellect to govern, will not prevent decay. Elevating the people through wisdom and loving kindness is the great labor in which Masonry desires to lend a helping hand. The constant danger of relapsing into servitude, the fatal nature of wars for republics, and the mutual dependence of civil and religious freedom are stressed. Persecution, paradoxically, matures them both. Free government grows slowly, demanding eternal vigilance from the people. Pike warns against the universal pretext by which the tyrants of all times take away the national liberties, the argument that popular election leads to riots and dissensions. The compasses and scale, beyond their literal geometric uses, signify the broader science of numbers, revered by Pythagoras and found in the Kabbalah and Bible. Virtue is defined as heroic bravery to do the thing thought to be true in spite of all enemies. The purpose of religion is an ethic, and theory without practice is worthless. Pike candidly observes the disconnect between professed creeds and actual conduct, noting that Masonry does not change human nature and cannot make honest men out of born knaves. The highest truth, he contends, is often not acceptable to the mass of mankind, and all truths are truths of period, suited to the capacity of the people at a given time. Humility is a crucial Masonic virtue, counteracting pride and over-anxiety for worldly honors. The dangers of unchecked pursuit of wealth and office are denounced as the twin plagues of the leprosy, leading to monstrous opulence and monstrous misery. Work, however, is noble, the noblest thing, and whoever is open to the deep penetration of nature knows that nothing is really small. A single thought, a minor act, can have immense, immortal consequences, as all things are interconnected by the electricity of universal sympathy. The section concludes with a powerful statement on the principles of free government, the sovereignty of man over himself, liberty, equal contribution by all to the joint sovereignty, equality, and the protection of each by all, fraternity. Instruction, Pike argues, is the organ of equality, providing light that all comes from light and all returns to it. He acknowledges the defects of democratic government, its slowness, susceptibility to demagoguery, and tendency toward centralization and caste systems, but asserts faith in the terrible teacher, experience, to guide humanity toward wisdom and progress. The written word, through printing, becomes a potent force for liberty, enabling thinkers to reach and move nations. The sword, too, symbolizes speech and war, sometimes a necessary chastisement to purify society. Finally, the symbolic numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12 are re-emphasized for their profound, ancient meanings, setting the stage for deeper symbolic explorations. Master Mason, 3rd degree, the nature of symbolism and the human condition. The Master Mason degree delves deeper into the profound nature of symbolism itself, asserting that all religious expression is symbolism. Pike argues that literal interpretations of ancient symbols and allegories lead to misunderstanding and a loss of truth. Words themselves are symbolic, and their meanings can be distorted over time. He critiques the blundering of mediocrity that translates profound symbols into the trivial and commonplace. The ancient mysteries, Cicero noted, taught the first principles of life, softening the pains of death by the hope of a better life hereafter. These were sacred dramas, reflecting nature's changes of the visible universe in which the divinity is revealed. Nature itself is the great teacher, offering symbols without prescriptive commentaries, allowing individuals to make their own inferences according to their capacity. This method fostered intellectual awakening, unlike rigid dogmatism. The shift from symbol to dogma, Pike laments, is fatal to beauty of expression and leads to intolerance and assured infallibility. Pike then addresses the ancient struggle to express the divine nature of the soul, its aspirations for immortality, and its superiority over animal souls. He asks whether modern knowledge offers a clearer understanding than the ancients who compared the soul to fire and light. He sees ancient allegories of the soul's origin and descent as attempts to make a great truth more palpable and impressive to the mind, no more to be scoffed at than Christian concepts of Abraham's bosom or a literal hell. He starkly contrasts despotism and democracy in their susceptibility to falsehood. Under despotism, men are false through fear; under democracy, as a means of attaining popularity and office, and because of the greed for wealth. He warns that these vices may flourish more rapidly in republics, leading to rule by ignorant and shallow mediocrity. The pursuit of wealth and office, when divorced from honor and integrity, transforms men into jockeys who will see first to his own interests, leading to national decay. Pike suggests that statesmanship should prioritize true merit, even if such men often refuse with disgust to enter into the struggle for office, due to the Jesuitical doctrine that all is fair in politics. He strongly advocates for the power of the written word, history, satire, and the printing press as weapons against demagogues and tyrants, arguing that speech enchained is speech terrible. He highlights that human nature is cruel, like the tiger's, and that absolute power inevitably leads to cruelty driven by fear. He questions why those who complain about democracy prefer tyrannical rule, citing the incredible cruelties of Roman emperors, and contrasting them with the safeguards of law and constitution in free governments. Pike explicitly links true Masonry with the banners of freedom and equal rights, noting its proscription by European states and the papacy for its perceived rebellious nature. He asserts that false and slavish political theories end in brutalizing the state, leading to corruption, factionalism, and bureaucracy. True Masonry, he asserts, labors to do its duty knowingly and wisely, with truth and reason as our chief weapons. He warns against centralization and the tendency of free states to create castes and perpetuate privilege, but ultimately expresses faith that experience will make the people wiser. The lecture then delves into the symbolic numbers used in Masonry, expanding on their Pythagorean and Kabbalistic origins. 2, Duad, symbol of antagonism, good and evil, light and darkness; Cain and Abel, Jachin and Boaz, or Muzd and Ahriman. 3, Triad, expressed by equilateral and right-angled triangles, represents principal colors: the trinity of deity, creator, preserver, destroyer, and man's composition, vitality, soul, spirit, also signifies wisdom, power, and harmony. 4, expressed by the square, symbolizes earth, its elements, cardinal points, and the 4 living creatures of Ezekiel and John. 5, Duad plus Triad, the 5-pointed star Pentalpha, connected with Sirius, Anubis, and Horus. Also connected to the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, miracle. 7, the peculiarly sacred number, 7 planets, heavens, altars, Mithras, lamps, temple, days of the week, symbolizes the ascent-descent of the soul through spheres. Numerous biblical references to 7. 8, The first cube symbolizes new beginnings after the 7 stages. 9. The square of 3, represented by the triple triangle, signifying completeness and culmination. 10 includes all other numbers, especially 3 and 7, the number of perfection. Tetractys, representing the divine name and unity. 12, number of lines of a cube, months, tribes, apostles, symbolizing cosmic order. Pike then returns to the crucial lesson of virtue as heroic bravery, emphasizing that the end of thought is action, the sole purpose of religion is an ethic. He distinguishes between dialectical, intellectual, and ethical. Practical, belief, asserting he who does right is better than he who thinks right. He cautions against systematic hypocrisy, emphasizing that creed has, in general, very little influence on the conduct. Masonry's purpose is not merely abstract understanding, but practical action to elevate mankind. The constant struggle against error, the slow conquest of truth, and the enduring vitality of error itself do not deter Masonry, which must be an energy, working for human amelioration, harmonizing conscience and science. He concludes by re-emphasizing the 3 great tenets of Masonry: brotherly love, relief, and truth, and the 4 cardinal virtues, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, applying them to both individual and national conduct, asserting that a nation embodying these will be immortal. Part 2. Secret and perfect master degrees, loyalty, industry, and self-improvement. These degrees build upon the foundational principles, guiding the initiate toward deeper personal cultivation and a more profound understanding of their moral responsibilities. Secret Master, 4th degree, the path to knowledge and fidelity. This degree initiates the candidate into the duties of secrecy, obedience, and fidelity. Pike acknowledges that the initial blue degrees might disappoint some, appearing rudimentary or imperfectly explained. He clarifies that these earlier degrees have been accommodating themselves to the often limited memory and capacity of the master and instructor, and to the intellect and needs of the pupil. True Masonic understanding, he insists, requires diligent study, tracing the streams of learning to their ancient sources to uncover the origin and meaning of Masonry. Knowledge is presented as the most genuine and real of human treasures, the development of the human soul. Pike eloquently argues that monuments of genius and learning are far more durable than those of power, citing Homer's verses outlasting palaces. The aspiration of the human soul is not merely to be remembered by name, but for our works to be read, our acts spoken of, as evidences that those influences live and rule. To learn is a necessity for the noble soul, to teach and share that knowledge is the worthiest work of man. He references the preacher's words, "Wisdom is better than strength, nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard." Despite potential indifference or forgetfulness, the Mason must sow the seed, whoever reaps, finding ample reward in the act itself. Secrecy is paramount, protecting the obligations and duties Masons undertake, especially towards unknown brethren. However, Pike draws a crucial distinction. Masons are only bound to keep secrets that are warranted by the law of our country. Edicts from arbitrary despotic power, contrary to God's law or the inherent rights of man, free thought, free speech, free conscience, it is lawful to rebel against and strive to abrogate. True obedience is to the just law, the fair expression of the will and judgment of the people. This degree emphasizes the duty of obedience to this true original law, which is conformable to reason and to nature, diffused over all, invariable, eternal. It cannot be abrogated by human law and imposes retribution for disobedience. Conscience, Pike warns, must be taught by God, conducted by reason, made operative by discourse, assisted by choice, instructed by laws and sober principles. He advises against perverse conscience, which is based on fancy or affections. Fidelity is a core virtue, extending to promises, family, friends, true friendship enduring beyond life's vicissitudes, country, and Masonry itself. The Mason is called to labor for humanity's best interests, elevating Masonic character and popularizing its teachings. He describes a Freemason as a man of honor and of conscience, independent in opinion, of good morals, submissive to laws, devoted to humanity, country, and family, kind to brethren, and ready to assist fellows. This degree impresses that Masonic honors degrade if not deserved. Perfect Master, 5th degree, honesty, industry, and moral accountability. The perfect master degree highlights the common and homely virtues of industry and honesty, exemplified by Kurum. Masonry, Pike states, neither loves nor respects the idle and those who live by their wits. Idleness is likened to the burial of a living man, useless to God and man. He quotes St. Ambrose on dividing the day between necessities, charity, and study prayer, and reflects on how much time is wasted in life. The soul grows through learning and doing, transforming knowledge into its own substance, much like a tree transforms natural elements. The cultivation of the soul's senses leads to appreciation of art, poetry, and noble actions, distinguishing one from the level of commonplace. The duty of honesty is clearly delineated. Lie not at all, neither in a little thing nor in a great. This extends to honesty in contracts, sincerity in affirming, simplicity in bargaining, and faithfulness in performing. Deceiving by speaking truth in a sense not intended or understood by the other is a liar and a thief. Prices should be fair, and one should not take the utmost penny that is lawful, lest it lead to unlawful gain. The wages of the hireling must not be detained, as this is injustice and uncharitableness. All promises and covenants must be religiously kept, unless unlawful or impossible. Pike condemns seeking fees for work one cannot do, or appropriating what God or the Republic has made common. He states that taking anything without returning an equivalent is dishonest, explicitly condemning gambling and speculating on others' distress. A perfect master should live such that, upon death, his conscience can affirm no man on earth is poorer because he is richer, and that all he possesses was honestly earned. He warns against receiving any wages that are not thy due, as it wrongs someone in God's chancery. Part 3. Intimate and provident degrees, disinterestedness, justice, and benevolence. These degrees deepen the personal moral code, focusing on relations with others, particularly in fostering peace, exercising justice, and embodying disinterested benevolence. Intimate secretary, 6th degree, zeal, disinterestedness, and peacemaking. In this degree, the Mason is charged to be zealous and faithful, to be disinterested and benevolent, and to act the peacemaker. Duty is described as the moral magnetism, guiding the Mason, regardless of external rewards or recognition. Fame, Pike notes, is limited, and true endeavor should not languish for lack of public applause. We are not born for ourselves alone, and our country claims her share, and our friends their share of us. Men are created for mutual good. The degree admonishes against disparaging others, lessening their reputation, or exalting oneself. It urges Masons to refrain from pride and censure, emphasizing that every man hath in his own life sins enough to entertain his own inquiry, so that curiosity after the affairs of others cannot be without envy and an ill mind. Disinterestedness and generosity are essential for Masons, as selfishness and censoriousness lead to injustice. Generosity is not merely returning what is received, but giving beyond expectation, valuing gratitude over money. A core duty is to act as a peacemaker among brethren and mankind. This requires controlling one's own passions, avoiding rashness and anger, as anger is a professed enemy to counsel, making relationships intolerable and turning jest into tragedy. Masonry is depicted as the great peace society of the world, striving to prevent international disputes and bind nations in amity. Pike vividly describes the horrors of war to underscore this mission. War comes with its bloody hand into our very dwellings, treasures are expended that would suffice to build 10,000 churches, hospitals, and universities. The Mason's vow is to make these lessons the rule of his life. Provost and Judge, 7th degree, impartial justice and eternal consequences. This degree inculcates justice in decision and judgment, and in our intercourse and dealing with other men. Those in judgment must be upright, impartial, divesting themselves of prejudice, and hearing patiently before concluding. Active injustice can be by force and by fraud, with fraud being the more detestable. Every wrong is an offense against justice, and Masonry seeks to enforce this law by teaching the profound truth that wrong and injustice once done cannot be undone, but are eternal in their consequences. The penalty for wrong is inherent, as surely and as naturally as the acorn contains the oak. God's justice is a law of nature, not an arbitrary decree, and therefore there can be no forgiveness of sins, in the sense of effacing the past, only efforts to redeem the future. Pike uses the metaphor of airwaves carrying every uttered word to illustrate that no motion impressed by natural causes or by human agency is ever obliterated. Similarly, every atom of our frame retains the muscular effort by which the crime itself was perpetrated. He questions the horror of perceiving these ineffaceable consequences in a future life. Masonry, through its moral code, condemns offenses that municipal law or public opinion might overlook, such as cheating, lying, slander, or seduction. It particularly condemns wrongs that induce others to partake, as the wrongdoer cannot undo the harm done to their victim. The lecture urges charity in judging others' motives, acknowledging human imperfection and the unknown struggles that lead to error. We can say which has the cleanest hands before man, but not which has the cleanest soul before God. He warns against self-righteous scorn towards the fallen, reminding that God seeth not as man seeth, and that even the abandoned criminal may yet have continued to keep some little light burning in a corner of his soul. The injunction, "Judge not, lest ye yourselves be judged," is paramount. Part 4. Intendant and elect degrees, charity, education, and fighting ignorance. These degrees emphasize the vital role of Masonry in actively promoting intellectual and moral elevation through education, charity, and steadfast opposition to ignorance and intolerance. Intendant of the building, 8th degree, Masonic learning and benevolence. This degree underscores that none are entitled to advance who have not by study and application made themselves familiar with Masonic learning and jurisprudence. It reiterates the journey toward the light, toward that star, blazing in the distance, which is an emblem of the divine truth. Moral conduct is a prerequisite for philosophical instruction. The 5 points of fellowship, symbolizing mutual aid, are reinforced, along with humility in inquiring into deity and sorrow for insufficient observance of duties. Pike stresses that the distinguishing property of man is to search for and follow after truth. Masonry, he asserts, has religiously preserved that enlightened faith from which flows sublime devotedness, the sentiment of fraternity fruitful of good works, the spirit of indulgence and peace. It strengthens religious feeling, extending its purity, as it has always existed in the depths of the human heart. A Masonic lodge, like a beehive, should exemplify collective work for the common good. It is not made for cold souls and narrow minds, but for those who comprehend its lofty mission and sublime apostolate. In comforting misfortune, popularizing knowledge, and preparing for a future when humanity is united by toleration and fraternity. Crucially, Masonry's teachings are eminently practical, asking nothing impossible. It does not cry down this world, nor exhort detachment from earthly life. Instead, it teaches that man has high duties to perform and a high destiny to fulfill on this earth. This world is his country, on which he should lavish his affections and his efforts. Life is a part of immortality, and this world is among the stars. True love of life and the world inspires resolute work for its amelioration. Pike highlights the finer essence within society, unseen but vital. The faith men have in each other, the trust that upholds business, trade, and even government. He criticizes those who depreciate this life, arguing that such views destroy the basis of religion, which is the belief in God's goodness. Life, with all its evils, is a blessing, a school for moral and spiritual training. Contentedness, equanimity, and patience are virtues enabling one to bear misfortune. He argues that no one can be a Mason if they are selfish, censorious, or ungenerous. Charity, he emphasizes, is the great channel of God's mercy, flowing from forgiveness and beneficence. Masons are expected to apply these principles practically, especially in employment, ensuring fair wages and humane treatment for laborers. The symbols and ceremonies, Pike reminds, often conceal rather than disclose the truth, hinting at deeper political and philosophical and even religious truth. Elect of the 9th degree, protecting the oppressed and practical virtue. This degree is consecrated to bravery, devotedness, and patriotism, summarized by the mandate, protect the oppressed against the oppressor, and devote yourself to the honor and interests of your country. Masonry is described as experimental, practical, and waging war against vices, prejudices, and passions, particularly the terrible solecism of sentiment without principle. Pike critiques Masonic sentiment that lacks practical, active virtue, comparing it to cold, brilliant northern lights without vital warmth in the heart. True Masonry demands principles as rules of action, not merely temporary sensations. He scathingly rebukes hypocrisy, noting how many condemn vices yet are guilty of them. It is no rare thing for him whose indignation is kindled at a tale of wicked injustice to be in some relation unjust. He points out the common human tendency to talk of virtue and honor, whose life denies both. True sincerity is rare. Even fervent prayers do not always correlate with moral conduct. Masons may be good in the lodge and bad in the world. The duties of life are more than life, demanding service to country even at personal risk. Pike laments that too many slink away from such duties, becoming barren a tree. Industry is never wholly unfruitful, bringing joy or at least banishing mischief. He asserts that Masonry is action and not inertness, requiring active labor for brethren, country, and mankind. It champions the oppressed, seeing itself as an instrument of advancement and reform. A key focus is the improvement of the common people through education, stating that an intelligent people, informed of its rights, will soon come to know its power and cannot long be oppressed. He warns against reposing on the lap of ignorance and the inevitable rise of popular fury if the masses are neglected. Pike explicitly states that Masonry's mission is not to engage in plots and conspiracies against the civil government. It is not a fanatical propagandist or enemy of kings, but an apostle of liberty, equality, and fraternity, supporting constitutional monarchy as much as republicanism. It avoids entangling alliances with radical theorists. It recognizes that necessity, as well as abstract right and ideal justice, plays a part in lawmaking, and that those so imbecile of intellect as to be unfit to be entrusted with the highest prerogatives of citizenship must remain under control of the wise. Yet it longs for the day when all races are fitted for political freedom, but does not preach revolution that leads only to disaster and defeat, or in substituting one tyrant for another. Masonry's sympathies lie with peoples fit to be free and to govern itself, detesting tyranny and abuse of power. It frowns on cruelty, advocating for humane treatment of workmen and the poor. It cannot be used to weaken moral hatred for guilt. He asserts that a Masonic juror would protect an intrepid satirist from a tyrant, even if facing scaffold and bayonets, adhering to duty alone. Masons prefer a life of obscurity filled with good deeds to the most splendid throne without freedom to act virtuously. He emphasizes that resistance to power usurped is not merely a duty which man owes to himself and to his neighbor, but a duty which he owes to his God. A true Mason identifies his country's honor with his own, tirelessly working against abuses, which he deems as hazardous as war. Life's length is measured by deeds for country and kind, not by days. Illustrious elect of the 15th to 10th degree, toleration, enlightenment, and universal morality this degree is devoted to, toleration and liberality against fanaticism and persecution, and to education, instruction, and enlightenment against error, barbarism, and ignorance. Pike defines toleration as respecting another's right to their opinion, and liberality as acknowledging that no human being can with certainty say what is truth. These are mortal enemies of that fanaticism which persecutes for opinion's sake. He condemns those who indulge in chimerical and visionary philanthropy while being intolerant. Better any error than persecution. Better any opinion than the thumbscrew, the rack, and the stake. He highlights the absurdity of torturing others over mysteries beyond human comprehension. Pike explicitly states, Masonry is not a religion. He who makes of it a religious belief falsifies and denaturalizes it. It provides a universal morality suitable for all climes and creeds, preserving the cardinal tenets of the old primitive faith which underlie and are the foundation of all religions. It teaches truths conducive to human well-being, eschewing vengeance and Jesuitism. Mankind, he asserts, outgrows primitive sacrifices and mythologies. The true Mason is one whose whole life is one great act of performance of Masonic duty, motivated by a love of duty rather than mere command. This eminent morality manifests as philanthropy, loving not only kindred and country, but all mankind, even the evil. True Masonry is freedom before God, not bondage unto men, guided by the universal laws of intellect, conscience, and affection. He laments that ancient theologies are insufficient and stresses that Masonry must journey on in the open street, appear in the crowded square, and teach men by her deeds. The degree then powerfully recounts the long, bloody history of religious persecution, from Moses and Joshua to Diocletian, Alva, and the Covenanters, emphasizing the unspeakable evils which follow from mistakes and errors in the matter of religion. He underscores that birth, place, and education largely determine faith, and that few truly examine the proofs of their creed. Not one man in 10,000 knows anything about the proofs of his faith. This leads to the conclusion that no man hath or ever had a right to persecute another for his belief. Therefore, Masonry requires only a belief in one great all-powerful deity, teaching toleration as a chief duty. He cites moral precepts from Zoroaster, Odin, Indian texts, and Confucius, demonstrating the universality of the Golden Rule across diverse ancient traditions. These teachings, centuries older than many current dogmas, form the universal charity that Masonry seeks to diffuse. The degree calls for the spread of knowledge, making the temple of science accessible to all, ensuring that the highest intellectual cultivation is perfectly compatible with the daily cares and toils of working men. It champions liberality and enlightened toleration, which will put to speedy flight the evil spirits of tyranny and persecution. It urges Masons to lead by example, dedicating themselves to enlightening their countrymen and rescuing them from ignorance and vice. Pike highlights the immense, unforeseen good that can result from even small acts of charity and education, like Pharaoh's daughter rescuing Moses or John Faust inventing printing. Great results, he notes, are achieved not by sudden miraculous acts, but by steady labor, persistence, and constant assiduities. Genius, too, relies on patience and painstaking and resolute industry. Masonry calls its members to be true to her mission by earnest, continuous beneficence, believing that no good work is done wholly in vain. Part 5. Royal and Chivalric Degrees, Wisdom, Liberty, and the Nature of God. This expansive section traverses a wide array of Masonic thought, from individual virtues and societal roles to profound metaphysical concepts and historical interpretations, culminating in a synthesized understanding of divine and human nature. Sublime elect of the 12-11th degree, truthfulness, sympathy, and public good, the duties of a prince. Ameth emphasize being earnest, true, reliable, and sincere, and protecting people from illegal impositions and exactions. A distinguishing characteristic of a Mason is sympathy with his kind, recognizing humanity as one great family. This sympathy necessitates serving fellow man and defending the great, suffering masses of the common people against oppression. Pike cautions against flattering the people or telling them they cannot err, emphasizing that the safety of free government depends on the virtue and intelligence of the common people. If people neglect the arts of peace and prioritize war or mere material gain, they will fall into slavery. He starkly portrays the inevitable miseries of a society where wealth concentrates and manual labor is devalued, leading to pauperism, vice, and brutalization. He vividly describes the plight of the poor. Fathers and mothers slay their children to have the burial fees. Little girls with bare feet sweep the street crossings when the winter wind pinches them. This apparently inevitable evil and mortal disease of pauperism is the most important social problem. Masonry, he asserts, must do all in its power to improve and inform as well as to protect the people. Freedom, Pike argues, is synonymous with piety, wisdom, temperance, justice, frugality, magnanimity, and bravery. Those who cannot govern their passions are delivered up to the sway of those whom they abhor. He emphasizes that humanity constitutes one great brotherhood, all bound to sympathize with each other, for no tower of pride lifts one above human trials. Suffering is not evil, but a discipline of virtue, designed to produce amendment and improvement, leading to infinite happiness and glory. Virtue is the truest liberty. He stresses that examples are the best lectures, and good deeds are pillars of remembrance. Life is a school for moral and spiritual training, with riches, poverty, joys, and sorrows all serving as lessons. Patience, cheerfulness, and contentment are virtues to cultivate in any condition. Pike advocates for living for others, condemning the lazy and luxurious, or hard and penurious, who ignore want and suffering. Charity is the great channel through which God passes all His mercy upon mankind. This includes fair treatment of laborers, forbidding exploitation. The degree reiterates that Masonic symbols conceal deeper truths, political, philosophical, and religious. It promises future revelations about the chief foes of human liberty, symbolized by Kurum's assassins, foreshadowing their ultimate downfall. Grand Master Architect, 12th degree, human dignity, cosmic harmony, and divine presence. This degree invites reflection on the dignity of human nature and the vast powers and capacities of the human soul. The soul, ever struggling toward light and God, finds solace in affliction. Pike posits that a dim consciousness of infinite mystery and grandeur lies beneath all the commonplace of life. Even amid daily occupations, the soul retains a sense of the infinite surrounding it. He highlights the greater and better things in us all that emerge under duress, capable of profound self-sacrifice. Man is not a helpless bubble upon the sea of his fortunes. His will can bend the circumstances of his condition to the intellectual and moral purposes of his nature. Life and the world are what we make them. The cheerful mind perceives beauty, while the melancholy sees gloom. Our social character shapes our experience. Selfishness breeds annoyance, while kindness attracts kindness. Temptations, rather than causing a fall, can strengthen virtue. All life's affections, bonds, and hopes center in the spiritual. The belief in God, His paternal interest, and a future life of endless progress toward perfection is indispensable for a meaningful life. Rejecting these leads to despair, making man a hapless wanderer. Masonry teaches a faith in a just, wise, and beneficent God, not a cruel or revengeful one. Society, too, is a creation of heaven, held together by moral bonds. Destroying public welfare through corruption and disunity is a vast crime. The value of the mind and soul is immeasurable, yet often unappreciated. Men judge themselves by wealth and rank, not intrinsic worth. Yet humanity possesses a most glorious capacity to commune with God and His angels, a reflection of uncreated light. The soul alone gives value to the world, and its elevation is paramount. The symbolism of the degree includes the Hebrew word Adonai, over 5 columns representing the divisions of the Scottish Rite. The North Star symbolizes duty and faith. The morning star, Jupiter Saturn, signifies the ever-approaching dawn of perfection. The 3 great lights symbolize God's power, wisdom, and beneficence, and the Kabbalistic Sephiroth, Kether, Chokmah, Binah, the chief of the architects, symbolizes the constitutional executive head of a free government, emphasizing the need for the best and the wisest rulers. Royal Arch of Solomon, 13th degree, the Lost Word, and the Constitution of Liberty. This degree explores whether its legend is historical or allegorical, hinting that you must find out for yourself what it means. The Lost Word refers to the true pronunciation of the sacred name, a superstitious notion, but allegorically it signifies the general ignorance of the true nature and attributes of God that faded from the minds of the Jewish people, who often worshipped lesser deities. The true nature of God was unknown to them, like His name. Pike asserts that all the ancient nations there was one faith and one idea of deity for the enlightened, intelligent, and educated, and another for the common people. The early Hebrews, he argues, had low conceptions of deity, depicting a God who walked in gardens, ate with Abraham, and was angry or jealous. However, the intellectual and enlightened few possessed an esoteric knowledge of God's true nature, communicated only to initiates, forming what we now call Masonry. This knowledge was, in a sense, the lost word. The Temple of Solomon is presented as a symbolic image of the universe, its arrangements and furniture reflecting cosmic order. The Holy of Holies, a cube, represents the true knowledge of God written by Him upon the leaves of the great book of universal nature. The 12 columns, brazen sea, and other elements are connected to astrological and numerical symbolism. The modern Masonic Lodge similarly represents the universe, with its lights symbolizing power, wisdom, and harmony, and the 3 principles of creation, dissolution, and regeneration. The luminous pedestal signifies the light of reason. The 3 masters, Adoniram, Joaber, Stalken, represent those who seek knowledge from pure motives, while the buried masters symbolize those seeking power. The lion guarding the ark represents Solomon, who preserved the key to the true knowledge of God. Enoch, the initiate or initiator, symbolizes the preservation of ancient philosophical and religious truths through symbolism. The degree applies the legend to political liberty. It is not enough for a people to gain its liberty. It must secure it through a fundamental law or constitution which is sacred, like the Ark of the Covenant of God. Masonry teaches that the pursuits and occupations of this life are not at war with the great purpose of life, but rather promote God's design. Daily toil has spiritual ends, nurturing virtues. Even in business, there is a sacred faith of man in man. Masonic lodges are temples of religion, inculcating disinterestedness, affection, toleration, patriotism, and the core virtues of faith, hope, and charity. Pike emphasizes that all is not evil in the world and that human endeavors are blessed by God. He powerfully declares, "Life is the wonderful creation of God, a great and glorious gift." The individual soul is connected to the universe, and every action, every element, speaks of God's presence. The law of retribution ensures that all actions have consequences. Grand Elect, Perfect, and Sublime Mason, 14th degree, the apex of moral and philosophical insight. This degree is presented as the culmination of the Lodge of Perfection, where the Mason is expected to discover the secret of Masonry by reflection upon its symbols and a wise consideration and analysis of what is said and done in the work. Masonry, Pike states, does not inculcate her truths. She states them once and briefly, or hints them, perhaps, darkly, or interposes a cloud between them and eyes that would be dazzled by them. Seek, and ye shall find, knowledge and the truth. The practical aim is the physical and moral amelioration and the intellectual and spiritual improvement of individuals and society, achieved through the dissemination of truth, combating falsehood in doctrines and fallacy in principles. The Masonic secret manifests itself to him who even partially comprehends all the degrees, especially those in the highest echelons. Masonry is depicted as the universal, eternal, immutable religion, such as God planted it in the heart of universal humanity. Its ministers are Masons who understand and are devoted to this religion, whose sacrifices are good works, self-interest offered on the altar of humanity, and perpetual efforts to attain to all the moral perfection of which man is capable. The duties of a good Mason are defined: to make honor and duty the steady beacon lights, to do right for its own sake, to war incessantly against error, intolerance, ignorance, and vice, and yet to pity those who err, and to labor to reclaim the vicious. A good Mason looks upon death calmly, despises riches, is unmoved by fortune, generous, charitable, forgiving, loyal to country, and devoted to God, measuring his life not by the course of the sun, but by the zodiac and circle of his virtues. The world is one republic, and Masonry seeks to create a new people, bound by science, morality, and virtue, embracing all parties and sects in a vast fraternal association. Masonry is philosophical because it teaches great truths concerning the nature and existence of one supreme deity and the existence and immortality of the soul, reviving ancient wisdom and revering the sublime lessons of him who died upon the cross. It embodies the good principle, warring against ignorance, brutality, falsehood, intolerance, and tyranny. To avoid persecution, it invented the mysteries, allegory, and symbol, transmitting its doctrines secretly. Now, openly displaying its principles, it stands against puny efforts of kings and popes to crush it. Pike emphasizes that human conceptions of God are limited and imperfect, shaped by mental cultivation. The highest view we can form is nearest to the truth. He acknowledges that religion for the masses must be alloyed with such an amount of error as to place it far below the standard attainable by the higher human capacities. The doctrines of the Bible, too, are not clothed in the language of strict truth, but in that which was fittest to convey to a rude and ignorant people the practical essentials. A Mason regards God as a moral governor, taking an active interest in the world, raising up intellects to reveal needed truths. Hiram, the type of humanity in its highest phase, is an exemplar of what man may become. Inspiration is not limited to a few, but is coextensive with the race, a consequence of faithful use of faculties, its source God, and truth its only test. The conscience is the very voice of deity. Masonry, assembling Christian, the Hebrew, the Muslim, the Brahmin, the followers of Confucius and Zoroaster, around its altars, leaves it to each to find their faith's foundation in their own scriptures, finding sufficient truth in the book of nature and the heart of man. Masons do not dogmatize, but can find a sure foundation for his religious belief in these deductions of the intellect and convictions of the heart. He studies nature to confirm God's existence and attributes. The practical essentials of morality, purity of heart, universal philanthropy, forgiveness, humility, sincerity need no miracle to recommend them. They are the law in every age and every country. God is our Father, to whom our most fervent love is due, our most humble and patient submission. Masonry teaches little from which men can differ, and much that promotes love and peace. The degree asserts that the soul of man has a value which nothing else has. It is an immortal thought, his boundless capacity, his infinite aspiration, which few truly value. It is the core of man, capable of communing with God and angels and reflecting the uncreated light. Pike concludes that life's wonderful creation, the gift of God, with its joys and sorrows, is a school for virtue, happiness, and a future existence. Contentedness with one's lot and accepting suffering as discipline are crucial. He stresses fidelity, reliability, sincerity, and compassion as duties. Knight of the East or of the Sword, 15th degree, fidelity, perseverance, and divine paternity. This degree emphasizes fidelity to obligation and constancy and perseverance under difficulties and discouragement. Masonry engaged in a crusade against ignorance, intolerance, fanaticism, superstition, uncharitableness, and error, faces significant obstacles, primarily the apathy and faithlessness of her own selfish children and the supine indifference of the world. Pike describes the common plight of the benefactor struggling against a powerful current, often seeing others claim the reward for his efforts. He exhorts Masons to work on, with the sword in one hand and the trowel in the other, focusing on duty, not results. Masonry teaches that God is a paternal being, demonstrating an interest in humanity unknown to all the systems of paganism, and extending pity for the erring, pardon for the guilty, love for the pure. Without this belief, life is miserable, the world is dark, and existence loses its charm. It teaches that all events are foreseen by God, and that man's free will acts as his instrument. The human soul is made for virtue and not for vice, sin bringing misery. The divine law is part of the great firm law of harmony that binds the universe together. God's goodness ensures that all works to a glorious end, and suffering leads to triumph. The darkness of trial is necessary to reach the light of understanding. Prince of Jerusalem, 16th degree, justice, peace, and the nobility of labor. This degree redefines the temple. To us, the whole world is God's temple, as is every upright heart. Rebuilding the temple means establishing a new law and reign of love, peace, charity, and toleration universally. The princes of Jerusalem embodied justice and equity, reconciling disputes, healing dissensions, and fostering amity. Their emblems, rooted in ancient Egyptian hierophants, convey these timeless principles. The degree reiterates precepts from the old law: execute true judgment, and show mercy and compassion every man to his brother. Oppress not the widow nor the fatherless, speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor. It stresses the nobility of labor, ordained by the Almighty for man's higher ends. Every task, whether in field or factory, office or ship, has spiritual ends, nurturing virtues like patience, calmness, and magnanimity. Pike calls for an awareness of the world of spiritual objects, influences, and relations that surround us, urging us to find a secret in the simplest things, a wonder in the plainest, a charm in the dullest. He critiques those who depreciate life, asserting that Masonry deems it no mark of great piety toward God to disparage, if not despise, the state that He has ordained for us. Life is a blessing, a theater of worthy action, to be enjoyed, studied, loved, and embellished. The ties of society, friendship, love, family are inherently moral and sacred. Even in the repulsive and annoying aspects of society, an invisible spirit of wisdom and beauty pervades. Honesty is the rule in commerce, and confidence is the bond that prevents societal collapse. The deepest human affections and enduring faith in each other are the true wonders, far outweighing all social ills. Knight of the East and West, 17th degree, unveiling ancient mysteries and Gnostic influences. This is introduced as the first of the philosophical degrees, promising to fully unveil the heart and inner mysteries of Masonry. Pike sets the stage by describing the historical convergence of ancient philosophical and religious systems, influenced by Alexander's conquests and Greek eclecticism. He argues that Mosaic law, like other ancient creeds, borrowed and was modified by contact with other religions, evolving from Moses to Daniel. Pike posits that early Christianity itself mingled together the old and the new, Christianity and philosophy, the apostolic teachings and the traditions of mythology. He claims that many of the Christians held that the writings of the apostles were incomplete, that they contained only the germs of another doctrine, to which science of the mysteries they gave the name of Gnosis. Gnosticism, drawing from Plato, Philo, Zend-Avesta, Kabbalah, and Indian Egyptian sources, taught fundamental principles of emanation from the deity, progressive degeneration, redemption and return, and a fortunate and truly divine condition in the bosom of God. Its language was rich in imagery, reflecting its Oriental origins. Pike then identifies striking analogies between Gnosticism and Masonic ideas: light emanating from a central source, the Masonic quest for light; the conflict of light and darkness, candidate wandering in darkness; creation by a secondary agent, the Logos word, the visible world as an image of the invisible; the human soul as an image of God existing before the body; and the soul's terrestrial life as a purification from matter. He asserts that Moses himself was an initiate in Egyptian mysteries, and that the Hebrew priesthood, Solomon, and the prophets possessed a higher science known as the knowledge of the Word. He delves into Egyptian deities like Amun, supreme god, source of divine life and light, symbolized by the ram, and Neith, primitive thought, creative power, linking them to Gnostic concepts. The symbols of the lamb, yellow hangings, 7 columns, and seals in this degree allude to these ancient doctrines. Pike highlights the figure of Hermes, Thoth, the master of learning, as the intelligence or word of God, who taught arts, sciences, and religious ceremonies. Osiris represents the principle of good, Typhon Ahriman, the principle of evil. The idea of man's successive influences under planetary spheres, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, is connected to the 7 seals. The Jewish Greek school of Alexandria, particularly Philo, integrated these eclectic doctrines, interpreting Hebrew scriptures allegorically for the initiated, while the literal meaning was for the vulgar. Pike explicitly links Philo's doctrines to Masonic symbols, the Supreme Being as a center of light, light and darkness as chief enemies, the world created by the Logos, the Word, and the human soul's divine origin and its journey to purify itself from the body. He traces Zoroastrianism from Bactria, noting its dualistic principles, Ormuzd light versus Ahriman side darkness, and the concept of the Word as the King of Light. Zoroaster's doctrine of restoration of all things and purification in a torrent of melted metal prefigures Gnostic ideas. The Pharisheim Pharisees are seen as having borrowed much from Persian doctrines, including the war between good and evil, the fall of man due to demons, and the protection of the righteous. Pike places the Essenes and Therapeutes as direct precursors to Gnosticism, distinguished by their emphasis on abstinence and moral practices to free the soul from matter. He asserts John the Baptist belonged to the Essenes due to his preaching in their region, his lifestyle, and doctrines. He notes Apollos' instruction in the way of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John, suggesting an Essene background before Christian revelation. St. Augustine is quoted to support that true Christianity was known to the ancients, nor was wanting at any time from the beginning of the human race. The degree outlines the core tenets of Kabbalistic doctrines from Jazira and Sohar, emanation from infinite light, the Ancient of Days, the King of Light, and the concept that the Supreme Being is all that is. He reiterates the idea of the Logos as the firstborn of God, the universal form, possessing the 3 primitive forces of the divinity, light, spirit, and life. The 10 Sephiroth are presented as manifestations or attributes of God, with wisdom as nous and logos, and justice and mercy forming opposing pairs that create harmony. The word is a recurring theme, found in Phoenician Creed and Chaldaic paraphrases of Debar Yehovah. Pike explains that ancient philosophies struggled with the creation of the material world by an immaterial being, often interposing intermediate principles or emanations, leading to a revelry in the creation of these inferior intelligences. He connects Jewish, Persian, and Gnostic angels, devils, and genii to these concepts, and ties the Gnostic concept of Abraxas' 365 emanations to Basilis's system, representing God manifested. Dualism in various forms was universal, light and darkness, good and evil, reflecting the struggle between Ormuzd and Ahriman, Osiris and Typhon. The Apocalypse, Pike suggests, paints the final triumph of light over darkness, borrowing imagery and ideas from all these ancient sources. The degree concludes by emphasizing that while these old controversies have faded, Masonry remains, teaching the same old truths of the unity and goodness of God and the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, truth over error, discarding wild and useless speculations to focus on plain, simple, sublime, universally acknowledged truths. Knight Rose Croix, 18th degree. Universal symbolism, evil's end, and core Masonic virtues. This degree emphasizes the character of universality in Masonry, allowing each Mason to apply the symbols to their own faith without being offended by others' interpretations. This universality enabled two kings, worshippers of different deities, to sit together in amity. The primitive men worshipped in the great world temple under the sky, seeing light as the type of good and darkness as evil. Pike outlines the universal ancient belief in a principle of evil, demons, fallen angels, Ahriman, Typhon, Seba, Satan, that brought sin into the world, along with a belief in a future life, purification, and a mediator or redeemer born of a virgin and to suffer a painful death. He lists various redeemers from different cultures: Krishna, Hindu, Kyonse, Chinese, Socios, Persian, Duvanai, Chaldean, Har-Orrery, Egyptian, Love, Plato, Balder, Scandinavian, detailing Krishna's parallels to Christian narratives: born of a virgin, raised the dead, washed feet, etc. Buddha, identified as the first Masonic legislator whose memory is preserved, is presented as a reformer who called all men to the priesthood and taught the existence of a single, uncreated God. His followers, the Samanians, were persecuted, but their doctrines spread to Ireland. The Phoenician cosmogony, with its Word of God written in astral characters, is noted as the faith of Hiram, the king and the artist. Pike describes their belief in a half-material, half-spiritual first principle and a disordered chaos from which the Word and creation came. The serpent, contrary to Hebrew tradition, was sacred to Phoenicians and Egyptians, symbolizing divine nature, immortality, and the sun, and was associated with Moses' brazen serpent. Lao Tzu's Chinese philosophy of reason as the mother of the universe is cited, aligning with Gnostic concepts of reason, silence, word, and wisdom. Isis, as nature, parent of all things, is presented through her self-description. The Hindu Vedas define deity as that which surpasses speech and intelligence cannot comprehend. The core idea of the Logos, word, as the creative wisdom, is a central theme, equated with Ormuzd, Ein Sof, Nous, and Demiurgos. This true word was the object of the ancient brethren's search. Pike suggests that John's Gospel's opening lines echo an older tradition, potentially from the Kabbalah or Gnosticism, emphasizing that Christ was that Logos. The degree portrays the great contest between good and evil, symbolizing the mysterious esoteric teachings of the Essenes and the Kabbalists. He notes that John the Baptist's teachings greatly resembled those of Jesus, and that his disciples, likely Essenes, readily embraced Christianity. Pike notes that old faiths have faded, but Masonry, vigorous and strong, teaches the same old truths of God's unity, immutability, and goodness, and the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, rejecting wild and useless speculations. The cross is presented as an ancient, universal sacred symbol, found in various cultures: Egypt, Assyria, India, Ireland, and representing universal nature. Its peculiar Masonic meaning is from the Egyptians, the crux ansata anka as a hieroglyphic for life, thus symbolizing eternal life. The rose, sacred to Aurora and the sun, symbolizes dawn, resurrection of light, and renewal of life. Together, the cross and rose mean the dawn of eternal life by the advent of a Redeemer. The pelican, feeding its young, symbolizes nature's beneficence and the Redeemer, as well as Masonic charity. The eagle symbolizes liberty. The compasses surmounted by a crown signify that equity and impartiality are invariably to govern the knight's conduct. The inscription, INRI, found on the cross holds a rich tapestry of meanings, with interpretations varying across different traditions and schools of thought. In Christianity, the most widely known interpretation is that INRI stands for Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judaorum, which translates to Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. This was traditionally placed on the cross as a titulus, stating the reason for Jesus' crucifixion. From a Hermetic perspective, the letters are understood to represent Igni natura renovatur integra, a profound statement meaning all of nature is renewed by fire. This alludes to a transformative process, often spiritual or alchemical in nature. Speaking of alchemy, another fascinating interpretation suggests INRI signifies Igni Nitrum Roris Invenatur, meaning the niter of dew is found by fire. This points to alchemical processes aimed at extracting a hidden, potent substance through heat. A more controversial Jesuitical interpretation proposes Justunicare reges impios, or it is just to kill impious kings. This less common reading is tied to specific historical and political contexts. Finally, a Hebrew interpretation sees INRI as an acronym for the four classical elements, I representing Ayamim, which refers to seas or water, N for Nur, signifying fire, R standing for Ruach, meaning air or spirit, the final I for Ibesha, which denotes earth. Beyond the inscription itself, the very symbol of the cross resonates with numerous ancient sacred symbols from diverse cultures. These connections include Plato's X shape, the distinct mark associated with Mithras, and other universal designs like the Tau cross and even the swastika, highlighting the cross's deep and widespread symbolic significance throughout human history. The degree's gloom-filled apartment represents the world under the tyranny of the principle of evil, where virtue is persecuted and vice rewarded, a pandemonium of sin and misery. This can be seen as the craft's sorrow for Hiram's death, the Jews' grief for Jerusalem, the Templars' misery, or the world's anguish at the Redeemer's death. The third apartment symbolizes the hell made of the human heart by its fiery passions. The fourth represents the universe, freed from the insolent dominion and tyranny of the principle of evil, brilliant with divine light, where sin and wrong and pain and sorrow shall be no more forever. These are types of Masonry's three chief virtues: faith, hope, and charity. The obligations of the Rose-Croix Knights include friendship, cheerfulness, charity, peace, liberality, temperance, and chastity, and avoiding impurity, haughtiness, hatred, and anger. Their philosophy drew from Egyptian theology, borrowing hieroglyphics and Hebrew ciphers. They practiced medicine charitably, advanced virtue, enlarged sciences, and aimed for a primitive way of life. The degree asserts its high antiquity, with ceremonies varying by location but respecting primitive and essential elements. It condemns the exclusion of any brother from the degree based on their religious beliefs, so long as they believe in one God and the soul's immortality. The rose and cross symbolize the revelation of beings' harmonies and the triumph of the cross. The Rose-Croix adepts respected hierarchical religion but opposed crowned anarchists, despots. Dante's Divine Comedy is interpreted as a Johannite, Gnostic epic, a declaration of war against the papacy, where he uses the devil as a monstrous ladder to ascend to light, negating Catholic dogma. The Roman de la Rose and Dante's work are seen as opposite forms of the same initiation into spiritual independence. The text mentions Cagliostro as a Templar agent seeking to rebuild the temple and introduce an Egyptian rite, along with his revolutionary motto, Lilia pedibus destru, tread underfoot the lilies of France. The French Revolution's secret movers, it is claimed, swore to overturn throne and altar on the tomb of Jacques de Molay. Part 6. Council of Kadash and Consistory, the Enduring Legacy and the Royal Secret. These degrees, especially the Knight Kadash and Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret, represent the philosophical and moral apex of the Scottish Rite, delving into the core principles of divine justice, universal equilibrium, and man's ultimate destiny. Grand Pontiff, 19th degree, immortality through influence and the power of thought. The Grand Pontiff degree underscores the Mason's labor for the benefit of those who are to come after him, desiring to survive their funerals through their good deeds. This instinctive impulse is presented as the surest proof of the soul's immortality. He gives powerful examples: the Spartan mother, Moses, Napoleon, Mahomet, Confucius, Peter the Great, Plato, Webster, and Calhoun, whose thoughts and actions continue to govern and influence long after their deaths. John Faust's printing press is highlighted as having exerted a greater influence on man's destinies and overturned more thrones and dynasties than all the victories of all the blood-stained conquerors. Pike contrasts the fallen grandeur of ancient empires, Solomon's Temple, Thebes, Tyre, Babylon, with the enduring growth and influence of Masonry, which, despite persecution, has continued to increase in stature and influence, defying the angry waves of time and the storms of persecution. The central message: it is the dead that govern, the living only obey. Our past actions and thoughts shape the present and future. to work for the world's benefit without expectation of personal praise or reward is the noblest ambition entertained by man and the true office of a Mason. He emphasizes patience, drawing an analogy to the slow, imperceptible growth of a mighty oak from a tiny acorn or the formation of continents by countless coral insects, illustrating that God hath chosen to create through gradual, continuous processes. Similarly, human endeavor, though seemingly small, contributes to vast, divinely determined results, like scattered vapor-forming clouds that bring rain to fertilize continents. The destruction of temples by barbarians is swift, but building takes combined effort and long toil. The Mason must be patient and work, leaving results to God, a soldier of the cross, knight of justice, truth, and toleration. The Apocalypse is described as a sublime Kabbalistic and prophetic summary of all the occult figures, an apotheosis of that sublime faith which aspires to God alone. Pike notes the strange and mysterious name Lucifer, the light-bearer, suggesting a deeper, hidden meaning beyond the conventional. He asserts that Plato and Philo also were inspired. The septenary 7 is celebrated as the crown of the numbers, uniting the triangle of the idea to the square of the form, and symbolizing the three absolute principles. Being is real, being is logic, and 4 elementary forms. The union of all 7 colors into white, good, and their absence into black, evil, is noted. The Sephiroth, particularly their last 7, correspond to numbers and represent attributes like benignity, severity, beauty, victory, glory, stability, and dominion, all in equilibrium. The Kabbalah's concept of God as the absolute, and that which is, and the analogy of contraries are introduced as the core of truth. Grand Master of all symbolic lodges, 20th degree, restoring purity and practical Masonry. This degree positions the Mason as a practical philosopher who builds the moral edifice of knowledge on plans traced by nature and reason. His duty is to aid in restoring Masonry to its primitive purity. Pike laments Masonry's historical degeneration from its primitive simplicity into absurd or hideous trifles, horrid vengeance, disproportionate oaths, and rituals corrupted by time and senseless mysticism. He sharply criticizes the 800 degrees that taught infidelity and even Jesuitry, and practices that degrade themselves by submitting to insults. Pike admits that the Scottish Rite's degrees had become jejune and insignificant, a grotesque commingling of incongruous things. He explains that while the Rite retains some lofty titles, they now hold esoteric meanings consistent with equality, where a knight is a sworn soldier of truth and a prince is a chief in virtue and good deeds. These titles are lessons, not idle gewgaws. He emphasizes that a Mason kneels only to God, not to man, upholding man's inherent dignity. The Supreme Council, Pike states, undertook to revise and reform the degrees, rejecting puerilities and absurdities and making them a connected system of moral, religious, and philosophical instruction. It uses ancient allegories, Hebrew, Christian, Egyptian, Persian, Greek, Indian, Druidic, Essene, as vehicles to communicate the great Masonic truths, but explicitly states it no longer inculcates a criminal and wicked vengeance. It has not allowed Masonry to play the assassin. The Rite's purpose is now to be a teacher of great truths, inspired by an upright and enlightened reason, a firm and constant wisdom, and an affectionate and liberal philanthropy. The Grand Master is to teach that external decorations are secondary to charity and beneficence. He explicitly states, "We teach the truth of none of the legends we recite. They are to us but parables and allegories, involving and enveloping Masonic instruction. They represent the different phases of the human mind, allowing each Mason to interpret them according to truth, reason, and their own faith. Masonry is universal, conferred on anyone from any country or religion, teaching to honor the deity, to regard all men as our brethren, and to make himself useful to society and himself by his labor. It advocates for liberty, fraternity, and equality to be achieved by making men fit to receive them, through moral power of an intelligent and enlightened people, without plots or revolutions. Where domestic slavery exists, it teaches masters humanity and alleviation. Crucially, the Grand Master is to teach employers that every man or woman who desires to work has a right to have work to do and to be paid fair wages, though it may reduce or annul his profits or even eat into his capital. For God hath but loaned him his wealth and made him his almoner and agent to invest it." He reiterates that Masonry is essentially work, both teaching and practicing labor. Manual, military, and intellectual labor are all essential. He defends symbols as ingenious veils that cover the truth, appealing to the heart and imagination. He outlines the duties of various classes of Masons, instructors, directors of work, architects, knights, to promote Masonic learning, charity, and reform. He calls upon the brethren to surpass the morality of Persian and Chinese philosophers, urging them to love one another, to be devoted to one another, to be faithful to the country, the government, and the laws. He emphasizes toleration of all worship and opinions, fraternalizing with all men, assisting the unfortunate, and acting well. He ends with a powerful call for self-reflection and a rejection of odious self-flattery, reminding Masons of the Egyptian judgment of the dead, where even kings faced scrutiny for their actions. He poses a challenge. Is it true that Masonry is effete, that the acacia, withered, affords no shade, that Masonry no longer marches in the advance guard of truth? And answers no, for there are still great works to accomplish, to enlighten minds, reconstruct society, reform laws, and improve public morals. Noachite, or Prussian Knight, 21st degree, modesty, charity in judgment, and trust in providence, this degree charges the Mason to be modest and humble, and not vainglorious nor filled with self-conceit. It condemns slander and calumny, particularly in journalism, which is portrayed as an inquisition that maligns motives and invents falsehoods for profit or factional gain. Pike likens such journalists to patients mockingly reproaching each other with their disorders and infirmities. He stresses that a Mason should not trumpet disapproval of others' faults, but rather commiserate his mishap. To attack a man who has fallen is inhuman and unmanly. He warns against arrogance in those of low character who proclaim other men's errors and faults. Pike advocates for a charitable construction of others' actions, emphasizing that ignorance gives disparagement a louder tongue than knowledge does. The Mason should reveal virtues impartially, but leave vices for others to discover, especially out of compassion for the innocent family members. He asserts that this is, beyond any other, the age of falsehood, where lies are part of the regular ammunition of all campaigns and controversies. The Mason, as a Noachite, must be humble and modest towards the grand architect, not impugn his wisdom, nor set up his own imperfect sense of right against his providence. He must avoid vain philosophies that deny God, elevate nature into a god, or reduce God to mere glittering logical formula. He should not chide Providence's delays or seek to hasten events beyond God's chosen path. Instead, he should stand humbly and reverently upon the earth and looking with awe and confidence toward heaven, assured of a real God, a Father and a Protector who loves and sympathizes and compassionates. Knight of the Royal Axe, 22nd degree, the nobility of labor. This degree profoundly emphasizes sympathy with the great laboring classes, respect for labor itself, and resolution to do some good work in our day and generation. It declares, Masonry is the apotheosis of work. The world is built by the hands of brave, forgotten men, and genuine work alone, done faithfully, is eternal. A life of ease is not for man or God, even the Almighty is not idle. True faith lies in an invisible, unnameable, directing deity present everywhere in all that we see and work and suffer. Man's highest destiny is not to be happy. His only true unhappiness should be that he cannot work. Work endures beyond death. Pike asserts that all of man's strength, morality and intelligence, patience, perseverance, faithfulness, method, insight, ingenuity, energy, is written in the work he does. Work is a constant test against nature's laws, revealing truth about the individual. He calls labor the truest emblem of God, the architect and eternal maker. Men without duties are like trees whose roots have crumbled. Nature scorns those who avoid work and rely on others. He celebrates great workers like Peter the Great, Cromwell, and Napoleon. There is a perennial nobleness and even sacredness in work. It is the only escape from despair, perfecting man and transforming wilderness into civilization. Labor, in all its forms, is a kind of real harmony that banishes doubt, desire, sorrow, and remorse. It teaches patience, courage, and perseverance. There is no religion in stagnation and inaction, but only in activity and exertion. The ancient monastic saying, laborare est orare, to labor is to pray, is invoked. The Mason's duty is to combat disorder, ignorance, and stupidity, following the silent admonition of the universe to work while it is called today. Labor is worship, a means to human excellence, developing virtues like self-sacrifice. Pike urges the toiler not to complain or feel humiliated, but to see fellow workmen in God's eternity, surviving there as saints, as heroes, and as gods. Duty forbids idleness. Work, whether manual or mental, is more honorable than rank. He condemns the notion that wealth should lead to a life of ease, arguing that the desire of accumulation for the sake of securing a life of ease and gratification is wholly wrong. It is better to live richer and die poorer. A happy man must always be a laborer, finding discipline and preparation for higher spheres in exertion. Wealth, if desired, should be for noble purposes, to support art, help the unfortunate, fight oppression, build institutions of learning, and elevate humanity. Without such aims, wealth becomes mere vanity, extravagance, and ostentation. He highlights that almost all the noblest things that have been achieved in the world have been achieved by poor men, for luxuries weaken body and mind, leading to hereditary decay. The history of wealth has always been a history of corruption and downfall. True distinction comes not from wealth or office, but from ennobling object in life, finding satisfaction in perfecting even the humblest machinery rather than accumulating riches for display. The greatest work is internal, working upon his own soul and intellect, becoming the greatest of artists and of authors, and making his life eloquent. Action is greater than writing. A good man is a nobler object of contemplation than a great author. Every man has the capacity for noble action in daily life through self-restraint, kindness, and patience. The Mason's central word is duty, leading him to ensure all labor permanent employment at its just reward, aiming to make some small nook of God's creation a little more fruitful and cheerful. Chief of the Tabernacle 23rd degree, Ancient Mysteries and Moral Purification, this degree delves into the ancient mysteries, particularly the Eleusinian, as precedents for Masonic initiation. These private worships, distinct from public rites, require preparation through initiation and aimed to re-establish the soul in its primitive purity and elevate it to celestial intercourse with the gods. Purity of morals and elevation of soul were prerequisites. Even Nero dared not attend after murdering his mother. Initiates were considered fortunate, destined for the Fortunate Isles, while the profane were plunged in the mire. Pike notes the mysteries' origins, likely India through Chaldea to Egypt and Greece, and their purpose to civilize savage hordes, to soften their ferocious manners, to introduce among them social intercourse. He emphasizes that the mysteries taught sciences and philosophy, not just morality, under a veil of allegory and symbolism accessible to different levels of understanding. The shift from symbol to dogma was fatal to beauty of expression. Socrates, like the mysteries, aimed to awaken and develop in the minds of his hearers the ideas with which they were already endowed. The ceremonies were often dramatic, performed at night in subterranean places, employing alarming and exciting elements to impress the candidate. Pike connects the Egyptian zener, cord of 3 threads, to the Masonic cable tow, symbolizing the triune deity. Indian mysteries involved subterranean caverns, solar fire worship, and a clothing in seamless linen, followed by baptismal sprinkling. He traces the gymnosophists' influence to Ethiopia, Meroe, and Egypt, where priests like Hermes preserved occult sciences and regulated calendars. The mysteries spread to Phoenicia, Tyre, where Osiris became Adonai Dionysus, and then to Greece and Italy, Osiris becoming Bacchus, Isis becoming Ceres. Enoch Hermes Trismegistus is credited with inventing writing, zodiac knowledge, and laws, and concealing secret sciences in temples. Pike notes Pythagoras' initiation into Egyptian mysteries, learning geometry, and the method of proving God's existence by reason. He links Pythagorean practices, east-west alignment, roofless temples, to Masonic traditions. The Druidical ceremonies, originating from India and Buddhism, also involved enclosures of unhewn stones, circular or oval, with initiations at equinoxes and solstices. Gothic mysteries, brought north by Odin, involved fearful tests and a descent into infernal regions where Balder was slain and restored to life. Joseph and Moses are presented as initiates, demonstrating the ancient connection between knowledge, priesthood, and high office. Egyptian priests taught one God, supreme and unapproachable, who created matter through his intelligence, not as an eternal coexistent. Early Christians, Pike notes, adopted the mystery structure, building the symbolic temple and preserving Jewish scriptures. Prince of the Tabernacle 24th degree, Symbolism, Astronomy, and the Soul's Journey, this degree focuses on symbolism as the universal language of ancient theology, addressing understanding through the eye, like nature itself. Ancient sages veiled their meaning in indirections and enigmas, using symbols and parables and dark sayings. Pike stresses the intimate alliance between the two systems, the symbolic and the philosophical, across all ages and secret societies. Symbolical instruction, he argues, is more efficacious than didactic language, rewarding the humble inquirer while disclosing secrets proportionally to the initiate's preparedness. The mysteries, more than mere moral lessons, involved teaching truths of primitive revelation, the existence of one God, soul's immortality, future rewards, punishments, nature's phenomena, arts, sciences, and philosophy. Socrates, he notes, alluded to these purified souls entering the dwelling place of the deity. Initiation was a mystical death, a purging of pollutions leading to regeneration and a renovated existence of life, light, and purity. A new language of hieroglyphics was developed for the highest degrees, concealing profound knowledge. Pike describes the priesthood's use of mysteries to build their power, leading to corruption, but acknowledges that kings, philosophers, and statesmen long restrained their self-destruction. He then details the Egyptian legend of Osiris, Isis, and Typhon as an allegory of the sun's annual journey through the zodiac, with deeper spiritual meanings. Osiris as the sun, Isis as the moon-earth, and Typhon as the principle of darkness evil, engaged in a continuous conflict. The aphonism, disappearance, of Osiris at the winter solstice and his Eurysis finding and resurrection are mirrored in ceremonies. He connects the sprig of acacia to the Erica tamarisk protecting Osiris's body and the woman weeping over a broken column to Isis at Byblos. The mysteries, like Eleusinian rites, aimed to inspire piety and console in sorrow, offering hope for a happier future and eternal felicity. They were funereal, celebrating mystical death and restoration to life, reflecting both astronomical and mythological themes. The historical figures like Joseph and Moses are portrayed as initiates who gained power and knowledge through these mysteries. Pike reiterates that the Temple of Solomon was a symbolic image of the universe, its details connected to seasons, planets, and constellations. He then delves into the pervasive symbolism of the sun and moon, Osiris and Isis, their generative powers, and their influence on nature's cycles, connecting them to the zodiacal signs: bull, ram, lion, scorpion. The winged cherubim are linked to Egyptian human-headed winged bulls and lions, representing fixed signs. The seven-branched candlestick is equated with the seven planets. Pike also explores the labyrinth, pyramids, and obelisks as solar and fire symbols. The astronomical basis of the mysteries is highlighted by the Eleusinian rites, where the images of sun, moon, and Mercury were represented. The ritualistic elements of initiation are described: purification by water, fire, and air, the candidate's journey through darkness to light, symbolic deaths and rebirths. He links these to the Pythagorean doctrine of the soul's origin in heaven, its descent into the body, and its eventual return purified by virtue. The doctrine of transmigration of souls, taught allegorically by Pythagoras and literally by the masses, is presented as a means of purification. The universe is a mystic egg, containing the principles of active heaven-sun and passive earth-moon causes, symbolized by the phallus and cetes, representing generation and production. The perpetual conflict of light and darkness, day and night, good and evil, is represented in the successive scenes of initiation. The degree concludes by emphasizing that all these symbols, from the most ancient times, point to the greatest of mysteries: birth, life, death, and new life from decomposition. Knight of the Brazen Serpent, 25th degree, Reformation, symbolism, and astral influences. This degree is both philosophical and moral, teaching the necessity of reformation as well as repentance, and explaining Masonic symbols connected to the universal legend of a murder, death, and restoration to life, signifying the temporary rule of evil and the eternal triumph of good. Pike references Maimonides on the early human deviation into star worship, where the great and venerable name of God was totally forgotten. The first learning was symbolic, with truth wrapped up in enigma and allegory. The ancient philosophers believed the soul originated in heaven, descended to animate a body, and sought to return to its source. This descent involved 3 degradations, designated by the name of deaths, passing through planetary spheres. The galaxy's intersection with the zodiac at Cancer and Capricorn, the gates of the sun, is related to the soul's journey. Each planet's sphere was believed to impart vices during descent. All this aligns with Plato's doctrine of the soul's purification. Pike discusses the belief in pre-existence of souls, held by Hebrews, philosophers, and early Greek fathers. The Kabbalistic 4 worlds, Aziluth, Bria, Jezera, Asaya, and the descent of souls through them are presented as Platonism in Kabbalistic terms. The Gnostics' 8 heavens and their final serpent-dragon power are mentioned. Genii, angel spirits, were believed to conduct souls, acting as intermediaries between man and gods. He explains that understanding ancient thought requires grasping their perception of heavenly bodies as animated and intelligent beings, not inanimate machines. He contrasts this with modern scientific mechanical views. He details the astronomical observations of primitive peoples, the regular cycles of sun and moon, equinoxes, solstices, and the naming of constellations: Aquarius, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Aries, Taurus, Scorpio, Sirius. These observations formed the basis of their religious beliefs, personifying the sun as Osiris, and his death and resurrection as his journey through the winter signs. The murder of Kurum by 3 fellow crafts is explicitly linked to the 3 winter signs. The celestial Taurus, bull, opening the new year, his attributes, horns, disk of sun, and the symbolism of Apis and the sacred cow are explained. The 4 great periods of the year were marked by the bull, lion, man, Aquarius, and eagle, appearing on ancient standards and still in royal arch-masonry. The ram-lamb became an object of adoration. Pike dives into the concept of the precession of the equinoxes, explaining how the sun's position in the zodiac changes over millennia, affecting the astrological ages. He links the worship of stars and constellations to these observations, showing how religious reverence for the zodiacal bull arose from its position at the vernal equinox in remote ages. He describes specific constellations: Pleiades, Hyades, Orion, Arcturus, Gemini, Sirius, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and their perceived influences, relating them to mythological events. Orion pursuing Pleiades, combat of Hercules with Nemean lion. The universal adoration of stars led to the arrangement of the Hebrew camp based on zodiacal signs, with Jacob's sons mirroring constellation characteristics. He mentions the Chinese palace of the horned bull and Japanese Hindu worship. Astrology, a pervasive ancient science, regulated calendars and festivals, with planets having houses and places of exaltation. The sun's death and rebirth at the winter solstice, celebrated with games and marked by 4 ages of man, symbolized cycles of life and regeneration. The allegorical history of Osiris's death by Typhon, darkness, drought, and his resurrection, spring, inundation, is meticulously detailed, linking it to astronomical phenomena: sun in Scorpio, moon full in Taurus, Nile's rise, and the scorpion biting the bull's testicles on Mithraic monuments. The brazen serpent becomes a key symbol connected to the Ophites, Dionysiac mysteries, and its association with the cross, representing life and salvation. The crux on Sata Ankh as a life symbol and the Tau cross as an emblem of life and salvation are explored. The cross, he asserts, was a universal symbol in ancient cultures: Hindu, Celtic, Buddhist, Egyptian, often linked to astronomical concepts. Pike then returns to the origin of the names of Kurum's assassins, proposing that Jubellum, Jubella, and Jubelo are corruptions of the names of 3 stars in Libra, emphasizing the astral connection to the Masonic legend. The search for Kurum by 9 or 12 fellow crafts or Ilus is linked to conspicuous stars in the moon's path or constellations in Taurus. He quotes Job on the sweet influences of the Pleiades and Orion, linking them to the victory of light over darkness. The division of zodiacal signs into ascending, descending, and superior-inferior, light-darkness, or Muzd Ahriman, is presented as a fundamental dualism. The concept of souls falling through the serpent and regenerating through the bull lamb is explained. The central teaching is that God is one, immutable, unchangeable, infinitely just and good, that light will finally overcome darkness. Masonry, having sifted truth from error, treasures these universal principles. Prince of Mercy, or Scottish Trinitarian, 26th degree, Universal Truths, Divine Trinity, and Human Immortality. This degree explicitly states that Masonry does not undervalue the importance of any truth, nor does it dictate to any man what he shall believe. It acknowledges that the Christian Mason sees foreshadowed in Krishna and Sosiosh, in Mithras and Osiris, the divine word that became man, while others may see the Logos as the perfect reason of the great, silent, supreme, uncreated deity. Masonry belongs to all time and all religions, finding its great truths in all. To every Mason, God is one, supreme, infinite in goodness, wisdom, foresight, justice, and benevolence. How God creates or manifests is left to individual creeds. The soul of man is immortal. God's infinite justice and benevolence assure that evil will ultimately be dethroned. Masonry does not decide how this will be achieved, nor whether the Redeemer hath appeared in Judea or is yet to come. It reveres all the great reformers, Moses, Confucius, Zoroaster, Jesus, Mahomet as great teachers of morality, allowing each brother to assign them such higher and even divine character as his creed and truth require. Masonry disbelieves no truth and teaches unbelief in no creed unless it lower its lofty estimate of the deity, deny human destiny, impugn God's goodness, or contradict faith, hope, and charity. It is a worship where all civilized men can unite, trusting in God and patiently waiting to understand mysteries. Pike eloquently describes the miracles of nature, from the growth of a seed to the colors, perfumes, and tastes of fruits, as inexplicable as the origin of thought and will, leading to the conclusion that we only hide our ignorance in a cloud of words. He highlights the mysteries of magnetism, electricity, gravitation, heat, light, and life itself, asserting that all power is equally a mystery. He questions whether our scientific understanding is truly superior to ancient views, suggesting that our definitions often conceal ignorance. Pike then posits that all truly dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah and returned to it. Masonry's search for light leads directly to the Kabbalah, which is the key of the occult sciences, embodying the alliance of the universal reason and the divine word. It reconciles reason with faith, power with liberty, science with mystery, providing philosophical and religious certainty. The Kabbalistic doctrine of Ein Sof, infinite light, and its emanations, Sephiroth, is detailed as the process of creation through self-contraction and unfolding. Adam Kadmon, the primal man, is the first emanation, encompassing all future creations. The symbolism of the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vava, representing male and female, active and passive principles, and the creation of subsequent spheres from Kether, crown, and the conjunction of Hakema, wisdom father, and Bina, intelligence mother, are explained. The concept of equilibrium is central, with justice and mercy balancing each other to produce harmony. The shattered vessels leading to evil are part of a divine plan to allow free will and multiplication. Pike delves into the complexities of the mystery of the balance, which is the royal secret of the 32nd degree. This equilibrium exists between divine wisdom and power, resulting in the stability of the universe and the unchangeableness of divine law, truth, justice, right. Divine justice and mercy, resulting in divine equity and moral harmony, allowing imperfect natures to exist. Necessity and liberty, reconciling omnipotence with human free will, ensuring that vices are punished by natural law. Good and evil, light and darkness, assuring that all is the work of infinite wisdom and love, and that evil is temporary. Sympathy and antipathy, attraction and repulsion, forces of nature that, in opposition, create harmony and movement. Authority and individual action, constituting free government, balancing liberty with law, equality with authority, spiritual and material in man, the intellect, reason, and moral sense governing appetites and passions, leading to a well-regulated life. He concludes that these pairs of opposites form the triangle, symbolizing deity, and the columns of wisdom, power, and harmony. The right-angled triangle symbolizes the union of the divine and human. Man, of a double nature, achieves purpose only when these two natures are in just equilibrium, leading to a life that is a harmony, and beautiful, like the great harmonies of God and the universe. This, Pike declares, is the true word of a master mason, such the true royal secret which makes possible, and shall at length make real, the holy empire of true Masonic brotherhood. Gloria Dei est celare verbum. Amen. The glory of God is to conceal the word. Knight Commander of the Temple, 27th degree, chivalry, truth, and service. This is the first of the really chivalric degrees, breaking the philosophical continuity to remind the Mason that speculation must be balanced with active duties of this great warfare of life. Though times change, virtue and duty remain the same. He asserts that truth and loyalty are as needed now as in the past, despite the separation of military and religious roles. Pike laments that truth is rarer now than in the days of chivalry, with falsehood becoming a current coin in politics and journalism. He scathingly critiques the press as the great sower of falsehood, engaging in slander and misrepresentation for political gain. The Knight Commander is called to revive the old knightly spirit and worship of truth, refusing to utter lies or break his word. He must speak the truth and all the truth, no more and no less, or else speak not at all. Protection of purity and innocence remains a duty against both bold violence and those who by art and treachery seek to slay the soul. Pike extols the modern heroism of those who face epidemics or danger, not for reward, but from mere humanity, and to obey the unerring dictates of duty, like first responders or ship captains. These are the true knights of the present age. By becoming a Knight Commander, the Mason dedicates himself to these duties. Knight of the Sun, or Prince Adept, 28th degree, God, creation, and the ancient wisdom. This degree elevates the inquiry to the ultimate questions of God, creation, and man's relation to the universe. God is the author of everything that existeth, invisible and filling the universe as its soul, reading thoughts, ruling movements, and being the infinite mind and supreme intelligence. Man, created pure with truth and light, has since fallen into error and darkness. The impure soul can only reunite with God through long trials and many purifications. God is indestructible, eternal, uncreated, indivisible, possessing wisdom, justice, truth, mercy, harmony, and love, and communicating with souls through mind alone. The universe, Pike states, was God's thought. I create worlds, and then I create man, whose soul shall be my image. Man is threefold, a fruit of God's thought, encompassing sensation, reason, and love. Primitive man, however, lost the perfect knowledge of the one true God and began to wander into materialism and sensualism. Pike revisits the ancient worship of sun, moon, stars, and elements, clarifying that while these were personified, they were initially seen as manifestations, not the supreme God. He re-explains the characteristics of various sun gods. First, there's Atham, also known as Aum. This is the Upper Egyptian sun god, representing the being that was and is to come. Next, Amun, the Lower Egyptian nature god, is described as an animating force. Then, Dionysus, the Greek nature god, is depicted as the sun in Taurus, a liberator, healer, and savior. He's a source of inspiration who suffers a symbolic death. Hermes, associated with Mercury, Thoth, and Tot, is presented as the inventor of letters and a winged messenger. The text further details Surya, the Hindu sun god, who is drawn by 7 green horses. Mithras, the Persian sun god, is born in a grotto at the winter solstice and is known as a mediator and the invincible one. Finally, Osiris, the Egyptian sun god, is described as the divine offspring of Neph. He's a benefactor, monarch of the dead, and a type of renovation. The explanation emphasizes the dying and rising aspects of these sun gods as reflections of nature's cycles. Al-Syrian, Chaldean sun god, and Hercules, Phoenician Greek sun hero Surcator, are also discussed as personifications of solar power, their legends mirroring the sun's journey. The north, for Masons, is the place of darkness. Pike asserts that ancient myths, though seemingly absurd, contain serious meaning when rightly interpreted. The worship of the sun and stars arose from observation and dependency. He contrasts modern mechanical views of the universe with the ancient perception of it as a great live creature, an army of creatures, in sympathy with or inimical to man. Astronomy for them was the most important science. He reiterates that a higher deity, silent, undefined, incomprehensible, existed above all the personified gods of nature, the supreme, one God, from whom all the rest flow. Examples include Atham above Amun, Brem above Brahma, Ihu above Elohim, Zeruane Akarin above Persian deities, and Al-Fadir over Odin. The worship of universal nature as a god was too near akin to the worship of a universal soul to have been the instinctive creed of any savage people. The primitive word of divine truth, though obscured by human degeneracy and fiction, left luminous vestiges in all primitive traditions. Each nation, in its pride, adapted these fragments, leading to diverse but ultimately distorted forms of idolatry. Chinese thought, more rational, initially resisted idolatry. Pike then delves into the Indian and Persian concepts of a universal, creating, preserving, and destroying force, Trimurti, and the dualism of good and evil principles, Ormuzd and Ahriman. He explores the nature of God, noting that God is not a logical being and that human language is inadequate to express him. We can only negativing in the deity everything that constitutes existence, making him logically nothing, non-ens to some, but a real God to the unlearned who perceive him as a father. He challenges modern science's materialistic explanations of light, heat, electricity, and life, arguing that our words often conceal profound ignorance. He concludes that these are all miracles, inexplicable phenomena. He then returns to the Kabbalah, identifying it as the source of many Masonic doctrines. It is a search after light, which leads to understanding Hermes, alchemists, and Swedenborg. The Kabbalah's core idea is that the Absolute is the being, in which the word is, the word that is the utterance and expression of being and life. Magic, he asserts, is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws, a royal art. The blazing star, or pentagram, guided the Magi and signifies the grand arcanum. The ultimate truth, Pike suggests, lies in an absolute, in the matters of the intelligence and of faith, an incontestable verity that makes its possessors arbiters and kings of the world. He warns against blindly accepting faith without reason or knowledge. The Kabbalah's concept of Ein Sof, infinite light, contracting to create space for emanations, is a central mystery. The Sephiroth are emanations or rays of this light, initially formless, then taking human-like forms, Adam Kadmon macroprosopos, to manifest God's attributes. The Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav symbolize generative and productive principles. The three heads of macroprosopos, Kether will, Hekima generative power of thought, Bina productive capacity, lead to intellection, Death. The four worlds, Aziluth, Bria, Yetzirah, Asaya, are states of creation. Pike explains that the Kabbalah's seemingly obscure language is a means to conceal profound truths from the uninitiated. The equilibrium of contraries, justice and mercy, male and female, is fundamental, ensuring harmony and enabling creation. Netzach victory and Hod glory lead to Yesod stability and Malakoth dominion, representing God's absolute control. This elaborate Kabbalistic system, with its complex numerical and symbolic interpretations, aims to explain God's manifestations and the universe's order. The degree also includes a Christian interpretation of the blue degrees, portraying the candidate's journey from a state of post-fall sin and misery, naked, defenseless, to light through faith, repentance, and reformation, guided by the Master, symbolizing the Redeemer. Hiram's death and resurrection symbolize Christ's death and resurrection, and the moral and philosophical failures that Christ overcomes. The Lion of the House of Judah represents Christ's strong grip, uniting humanity. The three pillars symbolize Christian hope, faith, and charitable judgment. Hiram's three murderers represent Pilate, Caiaphas, and Judas, and their blows. The lost word symbolizes the Christian fate, believed crushed, but resurrected. Pike states that Masonry has no pretense to infallibility and does not dictate belief. It presents great thoughts that have found expression in the different ages of the world, leaving the initiate to decide their truth. The vast influence of the popular idea of God on civilizations is acknowledged, leading to the necessary evolution of these ideas. He defines formal atheism as merely a change of name for God, nature, universe, but real atheism as the denial of any intelligent cause or providence in the universe. He argues that man's inherent instinct for immortality and the pervasive evidence of design in nature make atheism untenable. The great questions of existence, creation, evil, free will, immortality have tormented the human mind throughout history. Pike admits these are largely beyond human comprehension, yet we must believe. The true word of a Mason is the concealed and profound meaning of the ineffable name of deity, a truth lost and regained, encompassing God's nature as the ens, the tuon, the absolute existence, and the male and female principles in creation. This name, I Who, pronounced I am what I am, embodies God as the ultimate source of all existence. Elohim signifies the aggregate unity of the manifested creative forces. He argues that abstract moral truths must reside in a living and substantial being, God. The true, beautiful, and good are inseparable attributes of this one God. Man, being moral, reasoning, and free, reflects God's attributes. God's infinite love and charity are manifested in creation and providence. The existence of evil and suffering, though seemingly contradictory to God's goodness, is part of a wise plan to develop virtue and leads to an ultimate harmonious result. Masonry teaches this most simple and sublime one, universal religion reconciling duty and hope. The fraternal supper is a key symbol. Bread and wine signify nourishment, refreshment, and the future brotherhood of mankind, as well as the continuous transformation of matter and the shared particles of all life. To Christian Masons, it represents the Passover and Christ's Last Supper, symbolizing unity and sacrifice. Pike concludes by reiterating Masonry as the history of philosophy, giving regularity to their doctrines, spirit, and action, and developed the moral advantages of the mysteries. It teaches a lofty morality, exemplified by Christ's teachings of love, forgiveness, humility, and purity. Early Christians followed these precepts, fostering community and charity. The discipline of the secret in early Christianity, mirroring pagan mysteries, ensured the preservation of profound doctrines from the profane. Grand Scottish Knight of St. Andrew, 29th degree. Loyalty, humility, and the modern context of chivalry. This degree harkens to the ancient cross of St. Andrew and is consecrated to the qualities of a knight, humility, patience, and self-denial, exemplified by Jesus. The knightly vows emphasized obedience, poverty, and chastity, Templars, as well as defending orphans, maidens, and widows, and bringing oppressors to justice. Pike stresses that charity and generosity are even more essential qualities, and so also hath clemency. True valor is tempered by pity. The core virtues of this knight are virtue, truth, and honor, which are inseparable from wisdom and provide protection. He emphasizes disdain for material evils and bodily harm, urging Masons to remember the ancient days for excellent examples of virtue, truth, and honor, citing figures like Bayard, Sidney, and St. Louis. Pike critically examines the modern age, this age of iron, where men in this present age become distinguished for other things, such as wealth and political maneuvering, often lacking true gentility and courage. He laments the worship of gods of wood and iron and brass, steam engine, leading to men imagining they possess divine wisdom and supplanting providence with their own human prudence. He sees modern science, in its denial of God's direct providence, becoming antagonistic to all religion. He challenges the notion that science can control all, citing plagues and natural disasters as evidence of forces beyond human mastery, often linked to human avarice and cruelty. He cautions against inferring divine ethics from human logic, referencing Christ's teachings on suffering, Siloam. Retribution, he argues, bars retaliation, and forgiveness is wiser than revenge. Men are not born with great or small souls, but can enlarge his soul through voluntary acts of will, choosing the nobler nature over the ignoble. Masonry, in its continual effort to exalt the nobler nature, reinforces magnanimity, mercy, and a forgiving temper essential to a perfect knight. He calls on Masons to fight their inner low and evil principle. Pike laments the proliferation of Masonry's members, leading to obligations being less regarded and a pursuit of public notice and notoriety through injudicious journals and political wrangling. He critiques the empty pomp, with semi-military dress and drill of modern Masons, contrasting it with the noble knights, the heroic soldiery encased in steel and mail, who made themselves immortal memories. He challenges Masons to be respectable as a knight and not a mere tinseled pretender. The symbolism of the compass and square, where the compass points spirit should dominate the square earthly, is re-emphasized as a test of a Mason's true character. He condemns hypocrisy, usury, fraud, and defamation among brethren. The core message, virtue, truth, honor, are paramount, fostering loving kindness over jealousy, disputation, and revenge. Knight Kadash, 30th degree, the Templar legacy and the warfare against tyranny. This degree asserts that we often profit more by our enemies than by our friends. The anti-Masons of 1826, though enemies, purified Masonry by persecution, making it popular but also leading to the cheapening of its degrees and invasion by the multitude. Pike claims that the burr, a coded reference to the Templars, were the Templars under a veil, leading to the degree's proscription. He then portrays the papacy's impotent anathemas against Masonry as a continuation of old hostilities, a declaration of war needed to rouse apathy. Pike, seemingly quoting an enemy of the Templars, offers a controversial historical narrative. The Templars, founded in 1118 by 9 knights, secretly aimed to rebuild Solomon's Temple, which would become the metropolis of the universe, allowing the patriarchs of Constantinople to usurp papal power. They modeled themselves on the warrior Masons of Zorobabel, using the sword and trowel as insignia and concealing themselves as Brethren Masons, corrupted to Freemasons. Their secret doctrine was Johannism, a Kabbalistic Gnosticism, claiming St. John the Evangelist as founder and Theoclet as Grand Pontiff, who initiated Hugues de Payens. This doctrine, Pike claims, opposed Rome and kings, aiming to establish Templar rule over the world. The Templars outwardly professed orthodoxy to deceive adversaries. Their aim was to acquire wealth and influence to establish their Gnostic dogma, believing Rome and monarchies were corrupt and would destroy each other, leaving the world to the temple. Pike explicitly states that Freemasonry adopted St. John the Evangelist as one of its patrons, associating with him St. John the Baptist, and thus covertly proclaiming itself the child of the Kabbalah and Essenism together. He directly acknowledges that the blue degrees are but the outer court or portico of the temple, and part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of Masonry. Masonry is thus the veritable Sphinx, buried to the head in the sands heaped round it by the ages. He argues that the Templars' downfall was due to their hypocrisy and lack of humility, their inability to wield public opinion, and their leaders not fully comprehending their mission. Their wealth and insolence led to their projects being divined and prevented by Rome and kings, who then used false accusations, magic, obscenities, worship of Baphomet to crush them. Before his execution, Jacques de Molay supposedly organized occult, Hermetic, or Scottish Masonry with 4 metropolitan lodges. Pike hints that the initials of Molay's name, JBM, are found in the first 3 degrees, and that the Hiram legend was revived to symbolize the order's destruction and resurrection. The Rose Croix adepts, abandoning their ancestors' austere and hierarchical science, became a mystic sect whose dogmas mingled with Templar ones, believing themselves sole depositaries of St. John's gospel secrets. They saw in its recitals an allegorical series of rites proper to complete the initiation. Pike interprets Dante's Divine Comedy as a declaration of war against the papacy, a Johannite and Gnostic epic applying Kabbalistic figures to Christian dogmas, and a secret negation of everything absolute in these dogmas. Dante's journey through hell, by reversing the positions of his head and feet, signifies accepting the direct opposite of the Catholic dogma. The Roman de la Rose is seen as a parallel work. Cagliostro is mentioned as a Templar agent who aimed to rebuild the Eternal Temple using the motto Lilia pedibus destre, tread underfoot the lilies of France, against the French monarchy. A lodge linked to Rousseau became a center of the revolutionary movement in France, with a prince swearing destruction of the French monarchy on Molay's tomb. The Templars, through these movements, supposedly brought about the overthrow of the throne and the papacy. The degree reiterates that light is the equilibrium of shadow and lucidity. Movement is the equilibrium of inertia and activity, and authority is the equilibrium of liberty and power. Wisdom, virtue, and beauty are all forms of equilibrium. The universe has nothing. All space is filled with God's forces and light. The concepts of justice and mercy, severity and benignity, male and female, are presented as opposing forces in equilibrium. The 2 great columns of the temple, necessity and liberty, are reconciled by infinite wisdom. The ultimate outcome is harmony, stability, and dominion. God's name, Ihu, reversed and divided, becomes bisexual, revealing the male and female principles in creation. The symbols of square and compass represent the earth and heavens, respectively, and their interplay in man symbolizes the subjugation of the human by the divine. Part 7, Grand Inspector Inquisitor Commander, 31st degree, Justice, Divine Law, and Human Imperfection. This degree emphasizes the chief duties of a judge: to hear patiently, to weigh deliberately and dispassionately, and to decide impartially. The Holy Bible, square and compass, plumb and level, are invoked as reminders of these duties, ensuring uprightness, impartiality, careful consideration of facts and circumstances, accuracy in judgment, and uniformity in decision. The Tetractys of Pythagoras, suspended in the east, symbolizes the deity and its attributes, wisdom, strength, beauty, and the pyramids teach firmness in truth. The degree also reminds the Mason of his duty to scrutinize subordinate Masonic bodies and exclude improper persons, but also to inquire also into your own heart and conduct. Pike delves into the concept of natural law, a constant mode of action in the universe, evident in matter, mind, and morals. He acknowledges that while physical laws are obeyed without deviation, the law of justice in the spiritual world is harder to reconcile with observed phenomena, such as the lion devouring the deer or human inequalities. He admits, our little measure of justice is not God's measure. We cannot understand the universal law of justice by imposing our limited notions on God. He challenges the idea that one man must not be sacrificed to another, asserting that necessity rules in all the affairs of men, and sacrifices are sometimes necessary for the greater good of country or many lives. The vast machinery of the state is seen as humanity's attempt to achieve practical justice. Constitutions and laws aim to embody justice, but are ever imperfect. The pursuit of an ideal justice can be fallacious if it ignores necessity and leads to impracticable rules. Pike argues that the world will never be without want, oppression, or fear, given human nature and natural calamities. However, the plowshare of justice is ever drawn through and through the field of the world, uprooting the savage plants. Injustice, public or private, is inevitably followed by consequences, for justice is the angel of God that flies from east to west. Though the moral universe may seem incomprehensible, we surely know that it bends toward justice. The Mason's duty is to do what is possible and practicable to enforce justice, deepening the channel of human morality. Part 8. Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret, 32nd degree, the synthesis and the ultimate Masonic truth. This culminating degree reveals the occult science of the ancient Magi, imperfectly disclosed by Gnostics, hinted at by Templar crimes, and veiled in the highest Masonry. Magism, Pike asserts, was the science of Abraham, Orpheus, Confucius, and Zoroaster, its dogmas engraven on the tables of stone by Hanuk and Trismegistus. Moses purified and revealed them as the Holy Kabbalah, the secret heritage of Israelite priests. He claims that Jerusalem lost the Holy Word until a prophet Jesus announced a new tissue of legends and symbols, preserving the same truths for the elect. This scientific and religious absolute, the word alternately lost and found again, was transmitted to initiates of all ancient traditions and later became the foundation for secret societies like the Rose-Croix and Hermetic Freemasons. The Hermetic science is defined as the Kabbalah in active realization, or the magic of works, with religious, philosophical, and physical applications. It seeks to establish an absolute doctrine and discover the creative law in the microcosm. Pike re-emphasizes the symbolic representation of the square, compass, circle, dragon, and two-headed figure with sun and moon as representing earth-heavens, male-female, and the spiritual-material duality of man. He attributes the names for God in various languages, Hebrew, Egyptian, Persian, Greek, Latin, to their four-letter tetragrammaton quality, relating this to the Kabbalistic Tetractys. He asserts an absolute in the matters of the intelligence and of faith, stating that the supreme reason has not left the gleams of the human understanding to vacillate at hazard. There is incontestable verity, an infallible method of knowing this verity, which grants sovereign power to masters of the world. Science has nights and dawns, always progressing but never wholly new, reflecting God's eternity. The footprints of science are found not in philosophers' books, but in religious symbolism of the ancients. The science of the equilibrium was key to ancient initiates, revealing the universal gravitation around the centers of life, heat, and light, and the double law of attraction and radiation. Pike refers to Thales and Pythagoras learning the heliocentric model in Egypt, a secret preserved in the temple. The Word of God is seen as the utterance and expression of being and life. The Absolute is truth, reality, and the reason of universal equilibrium. Equilibrium is the harmony that results from the analogy of contraries. Humanity has suffered from attempting to stand on one foot, despotism or anarchy. Light is the equilibrium of shadow and lucidity, movement of inertia and activity, authority of liberty and power, wisdom of intellect, virtue of affections, beauty of affections, beauty. Everything just is beautiful, and vice versa. There is no void in the universe. It is filled with God's forces. Pike explains that if God's justice, severity female, reigned alone, imperfect beings could not exist. If mercy, benignity, I male, were unchecked, sin would go unpunished. The world's elements, like the balance of heat and cold creating winds, demonstrate this necessary equilibrium, where even evil is the shadow of the good and inseparable from it. Divine wisdom limits omnipotence, resulting in beauty harmony. The arch, resting on two columns, symbolizes this balance. The two great columns, necessity and liberty, are in equipoise. God foresees and uses human free will as an instrument, resulting in harmony, stability, and dominion, the last four Sephiroth. I am, God said to Moses, that which is, was, and shall forever be. But God, in his unmanifested essence, has no name. Ihu is the name of God manifested in creation, encompassing the entire universe in idea and actuality. The universe, Pike argues, had no beginning any more than God's thought did, for the Word was in the beginning with God, and was God. This ineffable name represents the Absolute manifested as being, encompassing both male and female principles. The royal secret is revealed as the mystery of the balance, or the secret of the universal equilibrium. This encompasses the equilibrium between divine wisdom and power, resulting in universal stability and divine law, between divine justice and mercy, leading to divine equity and moral harmony, making imperfect existence possible, between necessity and liberty, divine omnipotence and human free will, ensuring just punishment for wrongs while upholding human freedom, between good and evil, light and darkness, confirming God's wisdom and love despite the existence of suffering, between sympathy and antipathy, attraction and repulsion, creating cosmic harmony and movement, between authority and individual action, forming free government with liberty, obedience, equality, fraternity, and subordination to the wisest, between the active energy of the present popular vote and the passive stability of the past, constitutions and laws, symbolized by Jachin and Boaz. Finally, the equilibrium within man himself, between the spiritual divine and the material human, intellect, reason, moral sense versus appetites, passions. This last equilibrium reveals that appetites and senses are God-given forces for good, to be wisely used, not eradicated, enabling great deeds and spiritual progress. This equilibrium teaches self-reverence as immortal souls and charity for others who are partakers of the divine nature. The symbolic right-angled triangle in the apprentice's degree, with sides 3 deity, 4 earth, and hypotenuse 5 union of divine and human, reinforces this balance. This signifies that man achieves his purpose only when his two natures are in just equilibrium. Such is the true word of a master Mason, such the true royal secret which makes possible, and shall at length make real, the holy empire of true Masonic brotherhood. Gloria Dei est celare verbum. Amen. The glory of God is to conceal the word. In conclusion, Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma is far more than a mere instructional text for Freemasons. It is a profound philosophical treatise, a sweeping intellectual history, and a passionate moral exhortation, all woven into a dense tapestry of allegory and symbolism. From the foundational virtues of the entered apprentice to the ultimate revelation of the royal secret, Pike meticulously guides the reader through a complex synthesis of ancient wisdom traditions. He posits that Masonry, as the heir to the ancient mysteries, is a continuous quest for light, not merely intellectual knowledge, but a deeper understanding of God, the universe, and man's place within the cosmic order. This quest is fundamentally practical, aiming for the amelioration of mankind and the establishment of a holy empire of brotherhood, liberty, and justice on earth. Through the rich symbolism of its degrees, from the working tools to the celestial bodies, from sacred numbers to mythical narratives, Pike demonstrates the interconnectedness of all existence, governed by divine laws of equilibrium and harmony. The journey he outlines is one of constant self-improvement, urging the Mason to conquer base passions, cultivate intellect and virtue, and engage actively in the world for the good of humanity. He challenges superficiality, hypocrisy, and intolerance, advocating for a profound, living morality rooted in universal principles of truth, justice, and charity. While acknowledging the mysteries that transcend human comprehension, Pike ultimately asserts a confident faith in a benevolent, omnipotent, and wise God whose presence pervades all things and whose divine plan, though often veiled in apparent suffering and paradox, ultimately leads to a triumph of good and a restoration of perfect harmony. The royal secret is not a hidden formula, but the profound realization of this universal equilibrium, a truth to be lived and embodied, making each Mason a co-worker with the divine in the grand edifice of creation. Thank you for joining Occult Mysticism on this exploration of Albert Pike's morals and dogma. Share your thoughts in the comments and connect with our community. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more esoteric insights. Until next time, keep seeking the light.